Hello and welcome to the Kunoichi Kommotion NA Rising. Today we have NDA Inferno versus Redacted Ka for the lower finals. I'm Fifi here, joined by the lovely Willowtron.
Hello, I am something of a veteran of the Rising series for calling all heroes, unfortunately not for Kunoichi. That's the downside of being a caster. I can't play in these tournaments anymore, and all these teams that I know and love, I don't get to trounce them anymore, okay? I've retreated. My cowardice has saved me, okay? I won in Major 3, and then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm done. I'm out. I'll see you all later. I'm excited about both these teams. NDA have had like a few teams that they've fielded over the last little while, and Inferno seems to be the latest iteration of what they want to do for their Rising Series teams. But Redacted, I know that team. That was the only team that really properly stood up to us during Major 3, and from what I've seen of them, they have just continued to improve time and time again. So seeing them in this lower bracket match is a little bit of surprise. Kaiju Core really took it to them yesterday, and it's kind of a shame I wasn't there for that, but maybe I'll get to see it again today, so I'm not entirely disappointed going forward. I mean, you can see, like, Redacted 3-0 UD Phoenix. Phoenix do not have bad players by any means. Shine, particular on the hit scan, is deadly. NDA Inferno were able to achieve the same thing, so it's entirely possible that these teams are able to go toe-to-toe, but it's important to remember that Redacted, during the qualifying, they went 5-0 in their matches. They didn't drop a single game. KCMX being able to upset this is a surprise, a somewhat welcome one, because it's never nice to just see a singular team be the behemoth that no one else can touch. But yeah, I'm excited to see what all three of these teams who have made it thus far really have, because for the Rising series, even between matches, it really is critical how much they can improve just in that little bit of short time. And I know that all too well.
Yeah, I mean, improvement is key, right? And I mean, a lot of I feel like one problem that the Overwatch scene has quite frequently is like teams shuffling around a bunch. I mean, if you pay any attention to the Challengers series of Calling All Heroes, I mean, teams are just always moving all the way around, everywhere, every which way. I would know as a player, but so if you're able to stick as a team and get that improvement as a core, right? I mean, that can just be making all the difference. As I think we're going to get a look at NDA's lineup, see kind of who we're fielding here. And I mean, I think this team probably not expected to win this matchup, but I think they definitely have a good shot at it, right? And I think especially Redacted, I mean, as you said, they have looked very strong, but I mean, coming off a tough loss, could be at their most vulnerable point. NDA really could pounce on that.
Well, if there's anything that I know about Redacted, it's they always come back swinging, right? Even if you manage to take one down from them, they really do improve really quickly. NDA Inferno's lineup, I mean, I recognize Indicadom on that tank role, but for the rest of them, I'll admit, I'm not entirely familiar. Redacted Calling All Heroes, that's a team I'm plenty familiar with. Doobie is also an Oceanic player, so she's going to be on like 180 milliseconds. That was always like the two of us would either be on 180 or like 200 both at the same time. Starry coming off the tank role and onto DPS, which I know is her home field. Phoenix coming in for the tank player, and Moonlight and Mariposa there to make up this backline for Redacted. It is a really strong team, and if they've continued to improve as quickly as they did during Major 3 all the way back when, I just know that they're going to be a sight to behold at this point. And for both of these teams, it's going to be exciting to get a little bit of that real-life tournament experience, which they already have had a fair bit of. But in the lead-up to Calling All Heroes season being renewed, it'll only be a short time now until the Rising series comes back. And for both of them, this is their start to make a claim of which one is the one to be toppled as we get into that major CAH series.
Yeah, indeed. Also, now with Kunoichi having their own Rising series, with future Kunoichi tournaments as well. So, I mean, that'll be exciting to see, as I think we're going to get a look into the map pool here. I believe we're going into Nepal first. So, Willow, what are you expecting from both of these teams going into this first map?
Well, I believe this probably was Redacted map pick. I think they were the highest seed in this matchup, so they got to have map choice. Nepal, I mean, I'll be honest, Redacted have always favored kind of like a Ramatra kind of look, but recently they've been able to show that they're flexible across a bunch of different things, and teams, just sticking on all reliable Orisa, it's kind of just whichever maps they feel the most comfortable on at this point, really. You're often at this level not trying to think about, like, counteracting what your opponent is going to be comfortable on, and more just going to, like, well, we've scrimmed Nepal 6 times, and we've won Nepal 6 times, so we'll just go to Nepal each time. It was kind of the same thing when Li Zhang was always picked. It's like, well, we played Li Zhang every single scrim for the last month. We'll just go to Li Zhang first, and it'll be safe and fine for us. The later map picks I think are going to be where things get really interesting, and there's going to be the opportunity for the teams to show their flexibility. But again, I know that Redacted can do it, so it's going to be scary for NDA Inferno. This is definitely a matchup where they are swinging upwards, but being able to make it through the lower bracket this far anyway, and having KCMX beat Redacted, proving that they're not entirely invincible, it is going to bolster you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, showing that Redacted can in fact bleed, right? So, going into this first map, I think in these games, momentum's something so important. So, I think NDA, right, if they really want to show that they have a chance here in this series, if they can come out swinging here on Nepal, I mean, that could just be an excellent start for them. Get that momentum going, get the mood high, right, and just keep it going through the rest of the series. That'll set them up nicely.
Redacted, hovering at the moment over on this Sigma composition, which for Sanctuary I actually quite like. It gives you the opportunity to swing around and just play on that right side of point that we can see at the moment. But NDA Inferno running the Lucio counterpart means that they're going to be able to rotate all the quicker. If NDA Inferno are able to take advantage of those rotations and get on top of Redacted, then they're going to have an easier time comparatively, but Redacted are going to be perfectly capable of just swinging around their tank, anchoring on the objective and figuring out which parts that they can pressure in. For NDA Inferno, it's about forcing Redacted out of position, not just playing onto the point straight away, as they might be inclined to do.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be really careful into this Sigma comp, because it's kind of challenging you to make a move, because if you don't, they're just going to poke you down from a range. So move kind of on NDA Inferno here. Not just going to be able to sit around forever, but doesn't mean you can just charge on in foolishly. So now moving over towards the point are both tanks. As, wow, I mean, just so much damage already onto Indicadom. And, I mean, with that Orisa down, there's now no one to really lead that charge in. Point capture over here for Redacted Ka, but I mean, still members alive here. If they could get a pick off, they could maybe work their way back in, but I think they're just going to chill for the moment.
Like you said, for NDA Inferno, it's a matter of like actually forcing Redacted out, right? If you just sit there in front of a bunch of hit scans in a Sigma, you're eventually going to get poked out. That's exactly what we saw in the nades from Mariposa there. Just constantly apply pressure, and NDA Inferno just going to back out before they take any casualties on this occasion. But with Phoenix just anchored on the objective and this Sigma drawing so much fire, Inferno having a really difficult time pushing in.
Yeah, and this time they're opting to go under, I guess, to try and bunker to be able to get this point capture. But I mean, the problem, just so many angles here for Redacted Ka, and I mean, it's just two small chokes to try and push out of. The nade deflected, that's nice, but now the Sigma narrowed on up, walking through. That's the Curie down, the Lucio falls as well. The Orisa 1 HP, not long for this world, and that's Phoenix walking in, killing 4 for Redacted Ka.
When you bunker down like that in that side room, but you don't have control of the objective, all you're basically saying is, we're all in one place, please don't walk at us. Because if they do just walk at you, you've got nowhere to go. You can't play around the point and guarantee the fact that they have to, like, cap it before you die. You can't then get back up on the high ground. You've not got something like a Symmetra or a Life Weaver that can offer that verticality for the team. So you're just sealing yourself in your own coffin.
Yeah. Really difficult to try and make that work, as Miyuki now built up to the blade, going to try and look for that, but has to use that dash to escape the flux. But now with the beat, oh, and to deflect on to that captive sun, now is the time to pull the blade. The Ana falls, the Illy uses that burst, but not going to be able to escape Miyuki for long. Just putting in work on this blade, and that's Doobie going to be just sliding off to get that quick reset. NDA Inferno able to flip the point back, but not until 99% here for Redacted.
Not until 99% and with a heavy ult investment. Doobie's overclock still online, Starry Night building up to a Bob. For Redacted, this is kind of the ideal situation. They didn't have to use ultimates there realistically, and now they're going to have ultimates coming back in when NDA Inferno can't do anything about it. For Inferno, they have to hold here, but Indica is so far in and so low.
Yeah, going to have to be a little bit careful there, as, I mean, Doobie as well, gonna get their head taken off there by Sorry, putting in work on the Ashe, and, I mean, yeah, Miyuki gonna have to be careful there. Got quite low for a second, but, I mean, Redacted just going to take a quick pause, regroup, and push back in.
That slight mistake, though, it's given Taiko time to build up to another Kitsune Rush. Indica's coming up on Gravitic Flux, and Sorry's going to have a Bob to match Starry Night. So for Redacted, it's actually starting to look a little dicey. You've already given up 50% and you're only just pushing back in. If it's only 2 fights, Inferno might actually have the advantage.
Yeah, but here's the Nano Overclock, and that combination can be just so deadly, almost one-shotting to the body even, and the Nano runs out, but does get a pick off, and they've gained so much space, especially over towards this objective, and that means NDA are going to have to try and push back into that, trying to force out Phoenix here, and a good bit of damage does go through, but not quite enough, and Indicadom will be burned down after this Bob from Starry Night, a dueling Bob from Sorry, just to keep the point contested here, and I mean, almost getting this trade back onto the Sigma. They are able to take Phoenix down, and Sorry doing it all by themselves, but I mean, they are just alone here on this objective. They keep it contested, but only for so long, and that's Redacted calling all heroes, getting the first point here on the ball.
NDA Inferno responded really well to the Nano Overclock from Redacted. They knew that they could afford to give up just a little bit of space so that they could push back in, but Taiko, again, going back into that small room on the back of the objective, seals themselves in. The Bob comes out from Starry Night to make sure that Kiriko can no longer push out. Phoenix has the room to just walk on top of the Kiriko, and once that mainstay of healing power is removed from NDA Inferno, it doesn't matter how many ultimates you have. Indicadom doesn't even get to use their own Gravitic Flux. Because the Kiriko's dead and the Sigma's so low, there's really nothing you can do. If they played that slightly differently, they'd made sure to set Taiko up a little bit safer so that they weren't just immediately burned down upon trying to set up on the objective. There was the opportunity for them to absolutely turn that around. They actually had the ultimate positioning advantage, but the Kiriko gets caught out and it all goes downhill from there. Going into the second round, it's now Reinhardt into Arisa, so you can guess which one I'm favoring, but Redacted have already proven that they're looking good so far.
Yeah, good old-fashioned TP over Brawl towards the point, but I mean, that's the speed already gone here for NDA Inferno. Gonna make it really hard to push into this, especially with all the space Redacted already had, and I mean, they're just gonna opt to back off, give up point, and I mean, that's not the start you're looking for.
This Rhine Sim Mei composition is something that we've seen from Redacted before on this submap in particular, and they've done it for a really long time, so it's a composition that they're experienced in, and these Sim TPs from Starry Night are going to be the linchpin in making this composition work. I believe there was actually another team around the Rising level who did a similar thing, they just one-tricked Rhine Sim the whole time. If they've learned from that team as well and supplemented it into this composition, it is going to be deadly for Inferno to deal with.
Yeah. Now TP coming through, they're going to try and run on into Starry Night, who is so low, but Miyuku facing the hammer of the Reinhardt will have to just run away, and without that Sim on the front line, I mean, that makes the difference, and that's Inferno just collapsing.
Yubi and Starry are just such an effective DPS duo. It's nice to see Starry not actually back onto her main role, having to play tank for so long. I mean, she was a really good Ramatra. I won't lie, I was doing everything I could when I had to fill in on tank on those rare occasions to just, like, match the cooldown cycling, but seeing this team unleashed without having to hold themselves back by playing off roles, it's really a sight to behold. And NDA Inferno agree, they're going over to a similar composition now, just running the Ramatra Bap Lucio. You would expect the Arisa to be stronger, but if you're struggling to deal with the TPs, going to something more traditional maybe is going to help you out.
Junkrat is an interesting pick here. I was going to say, I feel like this is really solid here for Redacted. They have the point. They've got a bunch of ults that not only, I mean, ult's obviously very strong, but very good for this point in particular, that Blizzard, that wall. But a Junkrat could throw a spanner in the works here if you can just get a random kill with those pipes. But here's the Blizzard, everyone frozen on up, but not quite going to be able to get that follow-up, and actually it's Phoenix who goes quite low, has this shatter, might have to see when they choose to unleash that ability. The shield is out, nothing to stop it, but just knocks down the BAP. Will get that follow-up on the kill as well, though. But Sorry now, with the Junkrat, able to get some spam in and get Starry Night down. That is the main source of damage here for Redacted Ka. But now with the beat, this should allow NDA Inferno to push back in. They've got that Annihilation as well if they really need it, really need that sustain, that extra little oomph of damage. But Redacted going to fall back at least for the moment, but they should get back into this much faster than NDA Inferno.
Sorry on this Junkrat has to be looking towards the Reinhardt at all times. This is probably why they're on the Rat when Phoenix is on the Rhine, just to constantly try and punish it, but if you let the Rhine walk in, it's not going to count for anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sim already down, but Sorry's going to have to find something big with this tire, but it just finds an Immortality field, so now it's on Indica, who has this Annihilation, gets a lot of damage in, but just falls by the wayside. Sorry, the last one left on this Junkrat. Everyone is low, but I mean, just there's strength in numbers that NDA Inferno cannot do anything about, and that's Redacted solidly taking Nepal.
I really liked the way that NDA Inferno were trying to problem solve this kind of wacky choice of composition coming out on Nepal Village, but for Redacted there was one thing that they always had that Inferno felt like they never did, which was the initiative. It was always reactive from NDA Inferno. They were always falling back and responding to what Redacted were doing. For Redacted, it was always like, well, I guess they're on the point. What if we, like, TP around and just hit them from the back, right? We're always the ones taking the first move, always the ones taking the initiative. We're not responding. We're the ones setting the tempo. And whilst that can be a little bit dangerous if you get caught out, if you get over-aggressive, right? The team that's going to counterattack you is going to maybe have some advantage. But when you've got Doobie throwing in incredibly clean walls, even things like an Annihilation won't sustain you through the sheer damage output without a source of healing. And for Redacted, I mean, we can see why they're the strongest team coming out of the qualifiers. Perhaps why it was a bit of an upset for them to lose to KCMX yesterday, but nevertheless, NDA Inferno, they're now going to get their second map pick, so there's opportunity here to maybe take Redacted somewhere a little bit more uncomfortable. Though, as we said, for teams around the rising level, it's mostly just about going where you know that you will be comfortable, and Redacted, they're comfortable everywhere.
Yeah, and I think NDA, you also want to be sticking to characters you are comfortable with, right? Not just maps, but I mean the heroes that you feel you're really quite strong at. I mean, even at the highest level, comfort picks can just be so powerful. If you just believe in yourself to make a character work, it doesn't matter what the meta is sometimes, right? So I think for NDA Inferno, I'm not quite sure what characters they'd personally like to be going towards, but I think as a whole, I think I'd like to see them leaning into a more pokey composition because, I mean, as I alluded to earlier, right, the pokey style of play, you kind of just sit and wait and spam them out, and then the hope is, right, by the time Redacted pulled the trigger, they'll have not enough resources, and then you'll just be able to catch them out, right? So I think if they're going to keep playing kind of waiting for Redacted to make a move, right, playing to their tempo, then I think a pokey style would help them out. And here we're going to get Midtown for our hybrid. And I think this is a good pick to do just that. I mean, especially seeing on the defense, a lot of teams run the Sigma here. So I think if NDA Inferno could get that spammy style to work out for them, I think that could make things difficult for Redacted.
Sorry, in particular, I'm looking at as that hit scam player for NDA Inferno. They did a really good job on Nepal, to be honest. Like, I was looking at Sorry just kind of landing shot after shot. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. If you could do that consistently, then absolutely have your team lean into it so that you can just play strong hit scam maps. Miyuki, on the Genji, I mean, when I'm seeing, like, Ashe Genji, Soj Genji together on a team, I'm thinking, like, you could try and play something like the Junker Queen, maybe? Or, like, maybe like a D.Va if you were going to not want to play something like the Echo, but I kind of feel like Soj, Echo, D.Va, Mercy is kind of like... It feels like there's one or two pieces missing that you'd want to make this an ideal composition. It's almost like you've got 4 of the 5 pieces at any given moment. We can see NDA Inferno are going to be starting out with something along those lines. Sorry, maybe going to be Ash, maybe I'm just looking for a little cheeky pick on the Widow first, maybe going over to the Sojin later. Miyuki on this Echo, actually, but it's Taiko on the Bap and Suppo on the Lucio, so this Echo is going to have to be quite conservative with the way that they play, unless they want to get caught out, because if you're relying on your Baptiste hitting mid-air shots every single time with those biotic grenades, I mean, you know, it's good to have faith in your team, at least, if nothing else. But there's that pokey style that you were looking for. Redacted, all reliable, Doobie on the Sojourn, Starry Night on the Ashe, Phoenix is on Sigma. This is a composition that we saw on Nepal, and we know that they can run well. And allowing Mariposa to stay on the Ana without a clear counter to that means that those anti-nades that are usually just as lethal as always are going to be coming through regardless of meta state.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to have to be on Indica to try and shut that down with the shield, with the grasp, because, I mean, sure, you can use the Suzu for it, but, I mean, that ability is just so strong. If you don't have to use it, you're not going to want to waste it, right? So if you can just have that Sigma blocking it, that would be ideal. As now NDA Inferno trying to get a push going through the train here, but I mean, again, just a very difficult choke to make it out of, but they are able to gain a little bit of space towards the stairs here. But I mean, that dynamite looked like it was going to be rather huge, not quite catching, but I mean, NDA Inferno in a rather tough spot, still kind of corralled here, gonna have to do something to break out, but that's the Echo going down, although Phoenix going quite low for it. Looked for a second to maybe be tradable, but not quite gonna happen, and that's Phoenix just kind of doing Phoenix things, running rampant. Sorry gets a pick off, but might just matter for the next fight, but I mean, this one's all done and dusted.
Redacted actually gave up a bunch of space, especially around Fire Truck and that kind of back alley that teams can exploit. If NDA Inferno had realized that and kind of rotated around a little bit quicker, they genuinely would have been in a really strong point to just level pressure onto the objective constantly, because that's pretty much the only space Redacted had going for themselves. But NDA Inferno, they kind of got baited onto thinking, okay, well, we've gone train, so we'll sit on the high ground forever. It gave Redacted time to rotate around the Fire Truck again, come at them from multiple angles, and then Phoenix just got to run into the middle of your back line and kill everyone with the high damage that the Sigma does, backed up by Starry Night and Doobie. It's just free win.
Yeah, and Phoenix is already built up to this flux, so the rush comes out, but it's going to be met in kind with this gravitic flux, and that's Miyuki already down, and again, it's just Phoenix killing your whole team, just walking on in with no cares in the world. I mean, this is just incredible from Redacted.
This is why you don't usually play into this side room. You trap yourself in here, and yet again, you've created an artificial choke for yourself. It's no different to train. Now you have to push out. Taiko uses the Kitsune Rush to try and achieve it, but because Redacted were able to build up to ultimates, if they needed, they would have been able to use things like the Nano Boost as well. So, realistically, there was no hope for Inferno to take a fight like that, and now with only 90 seconds left, they need to address the fact that, okay, we need to be playing down main, we need to be taking control of things like Fire Truck, but if we keep forcing ourselves into tight corners and rough positions, we're going to have to use resources just to account for our own positioning choice.
Yeah. I mean, this is just so hard for NDA Inferno, and I mean, this is no knock at Miyuki, but just building 50% for that blade, because, I mean, it's just been so difficult for Inferno to make anything happen, and now it's Doobie's turn to try and make it just that extra bit harder, really chunking the members down, but not quite finding a pick-off just yet. And Indica has this flux. I think this will be a key piece here if Inferno are going to be able to get this point captured on up. But just choosing not to go quite yet, and again, they're just waiting for Redacted to make the first move, and that ends up being their downfall here, as, I mean, Starry Night putting in work on this Ashe, gets multiple pickoffs with the Bob. They do find out the Ana, but I don't know if that'll be enough.
Inferno are trying to take slow fights where they just get to like play for a prolonged period, but they're playing so far forward as they do it that they're putting themselves at a disadvantage. They want to play slow, but they're in range to just be run on if they're not careful. The flux from Indica Tom is stunned out, and now, do they touch? Oh, Miyuki just.
I mean, they get the touch, but I mean, that is a massive Flux Sun combination. And I mean, that's just going to be NDA Inferno. The pieces appear to be falling. They do get a couple of trade backs. This could be winnable. Miyuki with the blade, looking for the supports of Redacted, is able to find out the Illari, but that's an Ajax from subpar. And I mean, they just don't have the tank presence here on the point. Miyuki falls, and sorry, trying to do something with this overclock, but a Sigma in their face, going to shut it down, not even able to stay on the point. And that is a ridiculous full hold here from Redacted Ka.
Mariposa, if not contested and just left alive to heal the rest of the team, is just going to keep doing that. If you don't get rid of that Ana, who has such a high heal output, especially if you're using those nades defensively, you're just going to be struggling to uproot the backline in any way, shape, or form. You can get the Illari, but the Illari's almost there just to support the DPS. If the Ana's there to keep healing a Sigma, yeah, the Sigma's probably just going to stay alive forever, especially with Phoenix able to so efficiently cycle cooldowns in a way that I feel like Indica Dawn was struggling to do so a little bit, just with the sheer amount of damage that was constantly being leveled onto that Sigma. For Redacted, this is set a very achievable win condition. Just one tick is all they need, and then they're taking us all the way to the third map and a match point. There's a little way to go still for Redacted. I mean, NDA Inferno, they've not looked entirely shabby. They've got some fight in them still yet, and without the worry of, Sorry starting on a different hero and then having to swap in Miyuki as well, with both of them starting on the Widowmaker and the Echo respectively, like you mentioned, their ult charge was so low. By the time that Sorry had built up to overclock, it was just overtime. Same with Miyuki's Blade that wanted to be used in conjunction with Taiko's Kitsune Rush, but the ult charge is not quite there because you were having to swap heroes halfway through the round and with only about a minute 30 left. So now NDA Inferno, there's no chance of that. You don't get to swap this time. You have to fuller hold. Otherwise, Redacted are taking you to the third and final map.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you get this win, right, you're still down 1-0, right? Because the best you can get at this point here for NDA is a draw, and that is not a great start. Sorry, already down to some spam from Moonlight, and that's just going to give all the space in the world over to Redacted. They're just going to be able to move up, take angles, and that's the Ramatra already under a lot of pressure, going to have to back all the way out. The one thing is, I mean, that does give time for Sorry to come back, but they've backed all the way out and they need to walk back onto the point. But Sorry, making up for lost time here, does get the opposing Ashe here, and now NDA Inferno going to be able to walk back in successfully, getting Moonlight as well. And I mean, it looked really scary for a second there, but they hold on.
That's some really nice angle play from both Sorry and Miyuki to come back in on the Ashe and Hanzo and just recognize, okay, all they're doing is looking at Indica. Redacted, they can't play quite as aggressively as the Ramatra because the Sigma does like to be a little bit pokier, and with the sheer raw healing output of the Baptiste and Ana combined, it's going to be difficult to uproot this Ramatra, who can also just use the Nemesis form anytime. But from this point onwards, it becomes an ult game. Every ultimate that NDA Inferno have to use to defend is an opportunity for Redacted to just come in with an ult advantage and win out in the long run. As we can see them setting up around this alley and wanting to play towards the fire truck, NDA Inferno will probably have to use ultimates just to retain the space that they'll need to keep this map going.
Yeah, as now rotate through alleyway, they kind of sit there for a minute to try and bait NDA Inferno on which way they were going to go, but they do pull the trigger. Window comes out, but a nice rock, and it is Starry Night to find first blood on this Ashe. And now that is a nano that was almost online off the table, but still they have the Annihilation to try and fight this back. Indigo walking on in, but a beat to counter it up. Now the play is just, you've got to survive, you've got to stay alive on this Ramatra, but there's just so much pressure from every single angle, and that will be Indica falling, and now seems just a matter of time for Redacted. They can just walk on the point, no one to contest for NDA Inferno. And that is them securing Midtown and moving up 2-0 in our lower finals.
That was some really nice discipline from Mariposa. You could see them kind of considering, like, do I want to use the Amp Matrix here? Seeing the Annihilation comes in, they just go, no, we'll just bait it out. We'll just wait until it's gone. Sound barrier from Moonlight as well to make sure that Redacted are able to sustain through it. And then they re-engage back in. That is how you play the tempo, both reactive and taking the initiative. And it's something that NDA Inferno have got half of, but not the remaining component. Redacted did a really good job of acknowledging, okay, we don't have to take this fight immediately. We don't have to invest resources right now. And like I said, leading up to it, they were able to force out the opposing team's amplification matrix just to try and contest the space, and they still find the opposing honor at the same time. Taiko taken down early was just a free overall fight win for Redacted if they just continued to play their win condition. And they did so really cleanly. They had more ultimates in the bank if they really needed them. We even saw the Flux actually go wild entirely. Phoenix didn't get anything with the Gravitic Flux from Sigma, but it wasn't needed because the damage was already done, a little bit too much already leveled in for NDA Inferno, and now it is going to be match point as we go over to Flashpoint, and historically, Flashpoint has been Redacted's strongest map type. This is the one where they have consistently, even against every opponent, been able to win it out, so I mean, I don't hold a huge amount of hope for Inferno at this point, but nevertheless, we're going to get to see them do their best.
Yeah, so we're going to go to a short break here. NDA Inferno down 2-0. They need a reverse sweep to stay in it, so a couple of minutes to think what they need to change up, what map they want to go to try and fight this back, but that'll come after the break. Welcome back to the Kunoichi Kommotion Rising Lower Finals. Redacted Ka up 2-0 over NDA Inferno. I mean, this is looking rough for them. Willow going into now Suravasa. What do they do to claw this back?
Like I said before the break, Flashpoint is historically Redacted's strongest map type, so in terms of what you do, it's overcome all the odds. Begin the underdog story, the true underdog story. Reverse sweep out of the lower bracket, then you win the whole thing, grand finals are all yours, 4-0. You beat Kaiju Core MX, you go home the champion. It's easy as that, okay? You just gotta do it at this point. No,
Relatively simple, honestly.
It's that easy. I would do it, it'd be fine. No. I think realistically at this point you're mostly just trying to make sure that your mental is fine and you're still in it to win it. I mean, you can't do much else for NDA Inferno at this point. There's no points awarded for just like trying to be like having a good time. You know, like obviously you want to be having some fun, but you are
no
kind
fun,
of to
must win.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, if you're just like, well, we're going into the last map, we've not done so well, let's just throw it. It's like, okay. No pity points, though. You did just throw it. So, yeah, you've got to try hard. You've got to keep doing your best until the very end, and it will be, maybe, the very bitter end. But nevertheless, there's still opportunity. They were able to get this far off the back of their own merits, so it's not like there's no hope at all. It's just, we really do need to see all the stops pulled out at this point, the very best that they have to offer. And for NDA Inferno, if you want an opportunity to do it and really prove yourself, doing it live on broadcast is as good as any other, so... yeah, carry that forward with you. Try and keep your chin up, right? Mental, high. Make sure that you're not like, okay, we're going to freak out. We're going to lose everything. We're all over the place, and it's the worst day of my life. Like, no, it's fine. If you lose, it doesn't make a huge impact. It's not the worst thing ever. But you still want to win, right? You have to be trying. Starting out on this kind of Reaper, Soj, or Risa comp, with the Moira, I mean, Taiko's going to have a little bit more survivability and a little bit less worry about playing things like the Kitsune Rush perfectly positional, because you can just use a Coalescence whenever you feel like. But Redacted, there's the classic, Junker Queen, Lucio, Moira. If they weren't running Queen, I'd expect them to be running Ram, and maybe when they go into the Orisa, that's the switch that they will make, but they're going to be comfortable in this composition, and it's up for NDA Inferno to make them a little bit less comfortable.
Yeah, so now going in to market, Redacted on the edge of making it to the grand finals, whereas NDA Inferno, it's now or nothing. Is the Orisa spinning on in, Indica going low, going to have to be quite careful. Landing that spear though, Phoenix going to have to be careful of all the damage that Inferno have in this composition. Is now Indica trying to just bully the tank counterpart, try and walk on in, force the Junker Queen back, and Phoenix still so low. I mean, I feel like these tanks have not been above half health for the last 30 seconds, but that is first cap here for Inferno. So now just the longer this goes, the better it is for them. And also Taiko having that goal, this could be a big win condition for them, as now it's pulled. They're going to be able to walk on forward, and now the flex support here for Redacted goes down. That's all the healing off the table pretty much. So it should just be a massive boon to NDA Inferno, and now with the Sojourn gone and now a beat drop that was built incredibly quickly. You should expect Inferno to win this, but I mean the members of Redacted are still here. Starry Night just chunking everyone down, finding that pulse bomb, and despite all the odds, Redacted win it out, but I mean Inferno do get 63%.
63%, but they use their Coalescence and their beat just to get it. Redacted Mariposa still hasn't actually built up to a Coalescence, but Moonlight has a sound barrier. When you're seeing a Sojourn set up on those long angles and a Junker Queen in the field, you'd expect Redacted to win that fight quickly. The fact that it went as long as it did should have been NDA Inferno's win condition, just able to sustain for longer and eventually go in. But their focus fire is so split because Redacted are coming from so many different angles. They were struggling to find the initiative of just running onto one particular player. Now Phoenix setting up for this rampage, and the overclock.
But Phoenix is just melted before it can be pulled out. The overclock and the coal also used, but I mean it's just nothing found on the back end of any of those ultimates, and now Sorry finding the counterpart on Sojourn, and Inferno have just pulled that out of nothing.
This is what NDA Inferno need to do. They need to recognize that if we don't give the Junker Queen opportunity to be explosive, to take a quick fight, either by shutting it down before it starts or drawing it out for as long as possible, that's going to be how we win these maps. That's how we win these fights. Starry Night setting up for a touch. It looks like Redacted don't want to give this over yet, though.
Yeah, I mean, they've still got the ults to make this work, and there's the Rampage that we were looking for before, but it just finds the anti onto the Orisa, and I mean, Indica's perfectly healthy, but Phoenix on the other hand, 1 HP with that Terra Surge will go down once more, and I mean, Inferno are looking solid to get this capture, but they've just got to get the remaining pieces here of Redacted, but they are still healthy for the minute, so I mean, the longer this goes, the more members that come back of Redacted, the scarier this looks, but they do get the cleanup. And that is Inferno starting strong on Suravasa.
Yeah, Mariposa just finally going to get cleaned up at the end there, and Phoenix actually going over to the Sigma, I think is an interesting swap to make. Again, I was expecting the Ramatra more than anything, but Phoenix coming in as something of a newer tank player compared to Starry Night, who I am oh so familiar with, and whose Ramatra I am oh so familiar with, being directly in my face and every cooldown on me. Maybe this is just the direction that Redacted want to take. Mariposa going over to the Honor and Moonlight on the Alari. This is a composition that we've seen from them earlier in this series and seen them make good use of. If NDA Inferno were struggling with angles and pressure, this is a comp that will really punish them for that, but still, they've got the staying power of the Orisa, of the Beat, of the Coalescence, and Redacted are going to have to play into that.
Yeah, I think one of the key differences is now NDA Inferno have had time to build up all these ults, all this momentum on this composition before the Sigma comes on in. So they try to make something work for the Cole there, but not really able to get much. But I mean, the longer this goes, the more percent Inferno build up. And I mean, Redacted's still just trying to build up to something of their own, but that is a nice start there from Doobie. Traded back, and again, I mean, just Inferno on this point so solidly with that Orisa, and it just seems like they cannot be uprooted and overclocked to try and do just that, but I mean, they're hiding, they're playing their corners perfectly, and I mean, Redacted Ka just have to back on off.
And if there's one thing you can trust from Inferno, is that their response to these ultimates is still good. They were able to trade back onto Starry Night as well, even after Miyuki went down. This Reaper is going to be a pain point going into something like the Ashe, Sojourn, Ilari, but if you can just trade back each time, it won't be as painful as you're expecting. NDA Inferno still have ults, and it's 95% for the second flashpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, they're going to have to just barely touch with the Flux here, just barely dodging that Javelin as well, but I mean, the Moira's off the table. They do have the beat, so if they can win this fight quickly while they still have those shields, but not really looking like they're able to do that. The Orisa cleaned off the point finally after being able to stand there for so long. And Redacted Ka, once they get this comp up and running, it can be just so fatal.
I mean, every resource went into Moonlight just to make sure that Alari stayed up there. Miyuki went deep trying to make sure that Moonlight went down, but Mariposa uses the nade, uses the nano, make sure that this Alari stays up. You had to invest heavily. Starry Night going over to the Reaper means you've not got Blossom yet. You've used your Flux, you've used your nano. This Captive Sun from Moonlight has to be really good for them to be able to retain themselves in control here, because Miyuki has a Blossom, Indica has a Surge, and you can use those ultimates in conjunction. If Taiko builds up to a Coalescence as well, the sheer amount of damage will be very overwhelming.
Phoenix already going quite low, and I mean, it has to be a Captive Sun to respond. Finding out subpar, that is a good way to start the fight, and they're going to keep pushing. Starry Night, who's now moved over to the Reaper, going to just be putting in the damage onto NDA Inferno, and the rest of them just have to kind of feed towards the objective, try and die as fast as they can, but now 75% and counting. I don't know if they'll be able to get back to this point.
Subpar gets caught out on the Lucio just a little bit too deep in that corridor. We could see the rest of Inferno trying to react, but the Lucio just a little bit too slow, and now I don't think you'll even get back in time to be able to touch the point confidently, so it's most likely going to be this given over to Redacted CAH. There goes the cap, and instead we will be going over to our next flashpoint. There was opportunity for Inferno to be able to go back in. They just died a little bit too slow, got caught out a little bit too early, and now it's going to be Palace, already in control by them, and they'll have ultimates to work with, so it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, even though they lose that point, they've got all these tools to work with, all this space, all this positioning. So you should expect NDA Inferno to start this point off strong, but I mean, you should know by now to expect the unexpected when you're going against Redacted Ka. they can just pull something out of nothing. And I mean, they are getting quite close to a lot of these ultimates themselves, so the longer this goes, the worse it'll get for NDA Inferno, as now Redacted pushing out of main, getting over towards this point, and I mean, someone's going to have to contest this, and that is Indica running on in, and Miyuki as well pops the Wraith form, and the Blossom is slept, and that's Miyuki going down, and that is not a great start here. Now the Nano onto Starry Night, using a Blossom of her own, going to just make all the dominoes fall here for NDA Inferno, and it's Redacted starting off with a point on Palace.
And Redacted putting their foot down and saying, that's how you use a Death Blossom. No, you don't just Wraith form in from 50 miles away, do the most telegraphed Death Blossom in the world when the Ana still has sleep, and expect to be able to get them, okay? Instead, Mariposa is going to put the Nano onto Starry, allow Starry to build up to the last few percent of the Death Blossom, and then the Blossom comes out once the cooldown's already used and the fight is underway. Miyuki going over to the main now, this wall pressure is going to be good on Phoenix, but the damage is there to break through it quickly, so Inferno, they just have to be quick, and again, that's what they've been struggling.
Yeah, sorry, gotta be a little bit careful. Peeking that early, and now it's the Cole. This is the go button here for NDA Inferno. The Captive Sun only onto a couple of members, but I mean, that'll do it, as Moonlight picking off too. And NDA Inferno's push just entirely shut down. Again, no time to get back to this point, so Redacted Caw on series point, on map point. I mean, things are looking great for them.
If I was wanting to criticize anything about Redacted, it's that I want to see Moonlight and Doobie taking off angles together. The Solari and Sojin can be working with one another to really put the pressure on from an off angle constantly. Mariposa are actually a little bit behind, so Inferno are going to have the advantage in this next fight, and considering that everyone's just running it down main and they have point control to begin with again, they should have the opportunity to take the advantage here if they want and take the initiative. But they're happy to just sit on the objective until the Ana from Redacted gets back, and once again, it's a question of when are you going to make the first move? If you let Redacted do it every time, they'll win every time.
Yeah, and I mean, now NDA Inferno, last chance here in the Kunoichi Kommotion, and that's the overclock from Doobie to try and just shut it down, and that's Indica immediately going down, as well as Tycho. And I mean, just as the pieces fall here for NDA Inferno, I mean, I feel like it's been a repeated story. They have the positioning towards the point, and it just matters not.
They have the advantage in being able to take the fight as they want to, but the way they're taking the fight is just sit there, I guess, and wait for Redacted to do something. If there's any consolation from that, it's that Doobie used the overclock before the flashpoint was unlocked. So basically, you now get to go back in with 4 ults against 4 ults, and they didn't really get much percentage for it, but for Redacted, a 4-4 is an equal situation to be in. They're not unhappy with that kind of trade. All NDA Inferno have done is equalized, not gained favor.
Yeah, and Phoenix now with this Flux and a Nano as well. I mean, Indica's got to be really careful going down first, last fight as well, but I mean, Phoenix going in, getting these final blows off the back of the Blossom. And the one saving grace here is they do die a little bit earlier, so I think they're just barely going to get a scrappy touch. They do have 5 ults, but this is rough.
Yeah, not using any of your ultimates in that fight where now you're having to like rush just to be able to touch the objective is a critical move to make. Sorry just has to pull the overclock. It's immediately shut down. I don't think we're going to see it.
Oh,
nope.
No.
No touch at all. You held them for too long. You wanted to take a perfect fight. You had the initiative to do so, but you decided not to, and you waited and waited and waited, and Redacted took full advantage of it. NDA Inferno played that to counter just a little bit too much. Redacted acknowledged this. When they went over towards this Sigma composition with the 2 hit scan, or like the hit scan Reaper, and basically just played it to fire down main every time, they gave the opportunity for NDA Inferno, and for any team that goes against them, really, to be able to just take an off angle, or play super aggressive with their own Lucio, and just force Redacted back into a position where they can't really gain favor by just firing down mid-range lane, like long angles on mid. But if you just sit there on those long angles on mid, and let yourself get shot over and over again by a Sigma, and a Sojourn, and an Alari, and an Ana, like, what do you think is going to happen, right? Eventually, you're just going to get burned down, your resources are going to be expended as you try to stay alive, and ultimately that was the game that Redacted played. They didn't have to maintain angle pressure because there was no one contesting them on any angles, so they just bunkered down, played 4 hit scans to fire down main with a Sigma shield to keep them all safe, and they win out because of it. For NDA Inferno, there is plenty to learn here. As for every team in the Rising series, there's plenty of room for growth, and I feel like one of those main things that they're going to have to address is how do we make sure that we actually take the initiative in these fights? When we have the advantage in terms of positioning, when we have the advantage in terms of tempo, how do we follow up off the back of that rather than just sitting on point and letting ourselves get burned down? Because that really was the thing that we kept seeing on Nepal, and then again on Flashpoint, to a certain extent on Midtown too. But Redacted have made their claim for that Grand Finals position very convincing indeed, and this rematch against KCMX, it's going to be something to behold.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly they've got this nice bit of momentum now off of this nice 3-0, and I mean, they've shown here against NDA Inferno what happens if you don't take the fight to Redacted, so we'll have to see if KCMX can do a better job of battling that out. But now, just before the Grand Finals, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Hello and welcome back to the Kunoichi Kommotion Rising series. I'm still Fifi and this is still Willow, and we've got a banger rematch here, Kaiju Core MX versus Redacted Cop for the third time in this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, one advantage of being able to play against these teams so frequently is that you do start to figure each other out a little bit, but it can be a little bit tiring to be like, these guys again. Okay. Guess we'll just do it one more time. If there is something to be said, it's that actually having Redacted win one and then Kaiju win the next, it does leave things a little bit up in the air, but it makes it a little bit more interesting than like, okay, we beat them in qualifiers, we beat them in the upper bracket, now we have to do it again for the grand finals. How many times do we have to beat you? It feels good. Honestly, the way that Redacted have been playing so far and the form that they've shown in that previous series, it has looked really solid. There's little bits to pick at, as there is always for any team ever, but they looked pretty uncontested, I'll be honest, against NDA Inferno. For Kaiju Core MX, this is a team that has history, though. The bracket shows it, being able to beat Redacted in the previous matchup. I mean, in the upper finals as well, it's kind of exciting, to be honest, to see the behemoth toppled. When those matches are played, teams are really trying, because the lower bracket can be a moment of like, if things go wrong, you're just out for good.
Yeah, I mean, these teams played one time in the Swiss, right, where Like, I mean, obviously those matches still matter, but like not nearly as much. And that was Redacted winning it out, but then in the upper finals when it matters a good bit more, right? Redacted fall to Kaiju Core, right? So now is when all the marbles are on the table, right? This will show which of these teams truly at this moment is the Titan of Rising.
And as we can look at Kaiju Core MX's roster, you can see why they were able to take it as close as they did against Redacted. All of these names, for anyone who's played in Rising, are very familiar. A lot of them predate actually even Redacted's own players. They were there for the start of the Rising series in Calling All Heroes last year. Saturn was on the original Toki pilots team, or not pilots, but Toki team with me all the way back in 2022. So this is a team with a lot of experience. Saturn's now gone away, gotten some collegiate experience too. Sandbox, Felix, Hollow, they've all played on Kaiju Core MX for months now, maybe a year? I forget how long it's been. Weemy as well. I remember they were trialing for me on pilots way back when. It was a lot of fun to play with everyone here and against everyone here, but they've been doing it for a really long time. It's one of the few teams in Rising that can actually claim veterancy over a lot of the players on Redacted. But let's take a look at them once again, because Redacted, I mean, we're all familiar with them now, and I'm building them up to be the behemoth for a good reason. They've looked very strong indeed.
Yeah, and I mean, it will be interesting to see, can they bounce back from their previous loss against KCMX, right? Because getting the better of them in the most recent match, but I mean, we have seen they can do it. They have done it, right? So now it's just, can they do it when it counts, right? So, I mean, and if any roster is able to topple KCMX, right, I mean, it's this one we're looking at on our screens right now.
I mean, I feel like the sentiment goes both ways. If there is any roster that would be able to topple Redacted, it would be KCMX. So, I mean, it's exciting to see two teams that at one point weren't even particularly close. KCMX in Major 3 were a fair bit behind Redacted, and now they've been able to close the gap. I just have a huge amount of respect for every team in Rising that works to constantly improve and better themselves. That was one of the most fun things about playing on the winning team ultimately, was seeing everyone like racing to try and get on top of each other and try and make sure that any lead was closed, any gap was like as small as possible, just to keep everyone constantly going and pushing and pushing and pushing. And seeing these teams continue to play, and I mean, there's a lot of teams around the Rising level that just kind of fall apart. Seeing them stick around and continue, and all the players, like, I'm familiar with them and I recognize them, it is a lot of fun indeed, even with new names coming in and fresh blood being added to the scene. It's very exciting indeed. Let's get a quick look at our map pool again, just a quick reminder of what we can likely be seeing. I do believe we will be starting on Oasis. I think that was KCMX's map pick. So, beginning on a slightly different control point overall, Oasis kind of takes you to three very different locations in the way that it's played, but it is a first to four now, as we can see overall in this run of 7 potential maps. Maybe we're going to see 8. We did have a draw yesterday, so...
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's going to be very important in this series, right, is stamina. Right, and the previous 2 matchups of these teams, right, the first one was a first to 2, the next a first to 3, right, so we're building our way up, and now the longest of matches, a first to 4, right. I mean, this one's going to be a slugfest, and it's about, I mean, at the end, who keeps hitting the hardest, right, so will definitely be interesting to see how both of these teams handle that challenge.
Redacted as well are going to be glad that they were able to clean up that previous series pretty quickly. Otherwise, if it had gone to like a map 5 or a draw map 6, and then you have to go into a first to 4 as well against a team that you know can take you the distance, you do get tired. After doing a little bit too much Overwatch, that would be hours upon hours of playing in a tournament, maintaining your focus through all of that is a skill and a challenge in and of itself. Weemy's already causing for a pause. We got the PP in chat. Unlucky.
No.
But that's fine. It means we get to talk a little bit more about some of our favourite players. Felix is floating a hog at the moment. I don't think that we're going to be seeing the hog come out. I think we're going to be starting on Gardens. The submap names for Oasis always elude me a little bit. I think it's City Centre, University and Gardens.
Yes.
Unless I'm insane. Yeah, there you go. So we're starting out on Gardens.
You got it.
Probably going to be over to Old Reliable for Redacted. If they're not running something like the Sigma, it's probably going to just be like the Orisa or the Ramatra. For Kaiju Core, they do tend to play something a little bit more off-meta. They have rarely been a team that just sticks to like, okay, we'll just play Orisa, Lucio, Kiri all the time and it'll be fine. And those kinds of off-meta compositions, especially if these two haven't scrimmed against each other all that much, can really throw each other for a loop. But after yesterday's match, I mean, any advantage that you would have had in catching this team off guard, Mega Mulani will have gone over, Redacted will have dealt with that in VOD review, so now it's just a matter of which team can come out strongest, come out swinging, and as the gates open up, we'll see which compositions they actually want to settle themselves upon.
I was for a second stunned that they were going to play a Life Weaver. That would have been absurd, but no, I mean, you were saying off meta, but I mean, this is honestly fairly standard. The only thing that's a little interesting is the Genji is now Felix going just incredibly aggressive, getting lots of cleave from behind. I mean, this is just an excellent angle to start out with the Winston, and I mean, just so much damage done to Redacted, and not a whole lot they can do about it. I mean, you can see Felix already 60% to a Primal.
And this is what we're talking about that NDA Inferno needs to do. Okay, Redacted just want to run it down main. Fine, we will do an angle. It's this high-level concept that NA apparently has never heard of, but you just go somewhere that isn't directly into the enemy's face, okay? Redacted making the switch over to the Junker Queen is going to make it a little bit more difficult for this Winston, but like you said, already so close to the Primal, probably going to sustain anyway.
Saturn just goes in, says, I'll get mine, gets Doobie immediately to fall before a shout can come through, before anything really can happen here for Redacted, but they do trade back the Kiriko. That is a lot of healing off the table. Not that Felix needs it, because a Primal online for them. So going to be needing to pop it with all the shotguns that have been in their face, and now just kind of displacing the Junker Queen, making it really difficult for Phoenix to get anything done. And Cole responded in kind with a beat to try and stave off Redacted here, and Saturn wants to do more than that, going to try and push the aggression, but eventually we'll think better of it and just relocate to the point.
It's good for Saturn to be able to hold Blade there, because now you're going to be able to have Wimi build up to a Kitsune Rush and use those ultimates in conjunction, without Mariposa's Coalescence there to try and force you back. Nice discipline to see coming through from a former tank player in particular. That's where that skill set matters most.
Yeah, and here's the rush answered with a Rampage, which, I mean, Saturn not going to get cleansed, and neither is Hollow, so, I mean, kind of the pieces fall apart here for Kaiju Core as that Junker Queen ult kind of sets that all up, and Redacted finally get themselves on the board.
But it's already last fight territory for KCMX. 85% means they only need to win one, and Felix going over to the Deer is going to make it all the more difficult for players like Starry Night and Doobie to be able to find that poke damage and that chunk damage that you want in that kind of like brawl into poke situation you'll be doing with the Junker Queen. Saturn has the Blade, Sandbox still has the Overclock, and Redacted only have a beat to respond to one.
Yeah, and so that beat's going to have to do excellent things, but it's just a little bit too late as Starry gets that Wraith form forced early, and Saturn taking no hostages here on the Genji, just going to be cleaning on up. We'll go down there to Mariposa, but I mean, she's not long for this world here, going to just get cleaned on up, but dying late here isn't that bad. We'll give some time for the team to get back in, but they are trying to continue to contest this, and I think staggering here will be a bit of a misplay for Redacted, but still coming in, they're going to get a bit more percentage, but that will make their last fight even harder.
Yeah, staggering isn't necessarily the end of the world, but doing it with hero swaps to make sure that you can continue the touch means that your composition is now kind of out of the window. We're just looking at Doobie and Mariposa to make something work, but Sandbox still has the Overclock.
Starry Night moving over to the Sombra will be able to get a touch to start off here, and the Overclock coming out, but I mean, just multiple players in Doobie's face to shut her down on that Sojourn. They understand that threat, and I mean, Phoenix doing the same to the enemy Sojourn, and I mean, Redacted are still in this fight, but with all the overhealth from this beat, it will be quite difficult to continue fighting this out. But I mean, Phoenix is going to try their best, but only really a power block to save them, and that's only for a moment. The Tracer coming on over to the point, but will go down, and the Sombra not able to quite get on the point. That's Kaiju Core MX starting off Oasis with the first point.
A really nice presence of mind from them as well to not put too much attention onto the Doomfist, who's able to just like slam, block, punch, you know, deal with the rest of the team first and then turn on the tank when they don't have any kind of backup and support. It's something that, again, I don't think we saw all that much in the previous series, and already it's being highlighted to us why Kaiju Corps, even going up against a team like Redacted, were able to take the series in the end. It's so exciting as well to see people that I've played with previously level up so much, and just being able to now be on the caster side and hype up everyone that I used to be, both allies and enemies of. It's very fun indeed. I love to see this play coming through from Kaiju Corps MX, and the effort that they've put in to improve is on full display for everyone to see in this grand finals.
Yeah, no, some interesting comps here. The Zarya, I mean, very interesting. Can get kind of walked over if you're not careful, but also can just do so much damage if the fights go long. But Redacted do not want to let that happen. Just instantly take out multiple members of KCMX, and I mean, Sandbox knows what's happening. They're just going to let themselves die on the point, and I mean, quick fight there for Redacted.
And this is the traditional composition that Redacted looks so dominant during Major 3 on. Just playing something like the Ramatra Reaper Moira so quickly and being able to take the initiative constantly, play first for every single fight, it's difficult for any team to deal with. KCMX makes swaps to try and handle it, but cooldown's already burned.
Yeah, oh my, speaking of burned, Saturn, his health just disappearing, will be traded out, so that's just a lot of the damage gone, but I mean, KCMX just kind of forced to back off, and that leaves Sandbox stuck on an island, and I mean, she will be going down for that, so Redacted able to pretty firmly keep control at this point.
Wall comes out early from Sandbox, but it doesn't find the huge value that you'd be wanting for, and that's really going to be the crucial thing in this Ramatra main matchup now, is getting a really good wall and making sure that you don't get caught out by the opponents.
As now dueling coalescences here, but I mean, too many members for Weemy to really be able to heal them all, because they're just kind of too spread for that coalescence to work out. And I mean, Redacted really just taking the initiative here on University.
Now they've got the ult charge as well, they can just keep cycling in. One coalescence, traded for one coalescence, but Kaiju Corps still coming up on the rest of their ult bank, whilst Redacted have everything else already built. At 70% in building, they just need 2 fights or one prolonged one, and they've got the resources to make either of those happen already in lock. For Kaiju Corps MX, they have to go fast, but it's going to be deadly for them.
And yeah, Phoenix trying to flank here on the Ramatra, try and get a nice angle, and on the other side, it's Felix popping the Annihilation, but I mean, just all that they can do is block, and it can only last so long. Phoenix getting the greater value out of the Annihilation there, and I mean, it's only a couple members left for Redacted, but I mean, that'll be more than enough. 100-0 in response to that first round. Redacted pull things back.
KCMX take that last fight a little bit too slow. We can see that they've got Beat and Blizzard, but they've got them in the spawn room when the point is already going over to Redacted at the end there. So an unfortunate position to find yourself in, where you both didn't go fast enough to build ultimates, but also went so slow that you couldn't take a second fight in a situation like that. Just a little bit of tempo misplay overall. Oasis did offer this, like we mentioned. It's 3 very polarizing objectives. University is incredibly enclosed, and Redacted, who are a team that can very confidently play this very just hard brawl style. We've seen them also bring out things like the May Sim Rhine. They're going to have the advantage on a submap like that. Going over towards City Center, where Kaiju Corps MX can play something a little bit more comfortable for them back on their own home territory, this is where they get to show themselves as being either the dominant team in this, or the underdog team.
Yeah, both teams kind of going for what worked for them in the past here on Oasis. Redacted still opting in for that May Reaper. And I mean, this is going to be a lot of pressure for Felix to handle, so I think a lot of it will be kind of on her if she can juggle all of that pressure while not going down, or if Redacted can just burn her before she can really respond. So now they're just kind of trying to contest the point, kind of wait for KCMX to make a move, make a misstep onto this objective here, and that is the jump. Felix slowed. They're putting just so much damage into her, but she will not go down, and that is how you kind of have to play this Winston. And now on the re-engage, that's the Moira gone. Mariposa out of the fight means not a lot of sustain here for Redacted Con. This shows us why KCMX love this Winston so much. I mean, they just get so much value, know exactly what they need to do, and they start with first capture here on City Center.
KCMX do a really good job there of kind of dropping down with Felix on the Winston, uses the bubble to bait Redacted into using cooldowns of their own. Phoenix pops the Nemesis form to try and get on top of Hollow, who goes quite low on the Lucio, but is able to get out with the support of Weemy. And then as soon as that Nemesis form is down, it's a very quick re-engage. Weemy comes in from an off angle as Felix goes on top of the Ramatra, who's forced to use every cooldown just to cover the position that they are now finding themselves in. That kind of very quick in and out response is exactly what you need.
Yeah, and they're just speeding in. Saturn already built up to a Blade, and I mean, honestly, the Blade just get the beat out as already Doobie found it, but I mean, Felix goes down in that time, so I mean, Saturn also now a little too deep. Gotta be very careful for this Coalescence, and Sandbox going to try and pull this back with the Overclock, looking for the Moira, but just fades away, and I mean, as does the Moira, the Overclock will fade away, especially with that punctuation mark there from Starry with the Blossom. So that will be Redacted gaining the point back. I mean, I would say that, but I mean, this point is notoriously stallable. And if Doobie goes down, I mean, KCMX are still here. They have the Primal, but it is burned down now. Just the Genji stalling out the point. And I mean, finally, Redacted get it back into their grasp, but not before 77% here for KCMX.
Yeah, KCMX invest really heavily just to try and keep the point going. There's the beat, there's the primal. Sandbox uses the overclock as well, which doesn't necessarily find huge value, but Redacted are coming out slightly on top in terms of ult charge. It's just that KCMX wanted to push it to a last fight territory where they had to get one cap again, flip the point, and then they'll be in a comfortable position. Like you said, it's stallable, but those longer fights do well for them when they can catch Moonlight out like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a really nice punish. Moonlight a little far away from the team and just able to be found out. And, I mean, again, Saturn finding out Doobie, just make one misstep and Saturn will come after you. But maybe a little too overconfident there. Mariposa going to be able to trade it back. And, I mean, Redacted kind of has the comp with the more staying power, so KCMX just have to back on off.
It was a really nice engage and pick from KCMX, but it felt like afterwards they got a little bit too split in who they were going after. Doobie should have been the next target, but a little bit lacking in focus on who they're actually going to go for. Now with the call to start off from Redacted, KCMX can just back out and wait this one out, play for the high ground as we're seeing here, because there's no need to go into Mariposa when there's that much damage coming through.
Yeah, I mean, that call was just a little early. KCMX not even really walking in quite yet, so I mean, that's just an ult off the table, and now the dive with the Blade. The Lucio so low, but Saturn can't find it in the mess of visuals here. And that's Redacted with the beat, with the Annihilation, with the Blossom. I mean, they just chucked everything in there to make sure that fight goes their way. Now 85%. KCMX should be able to get back, but it'll be really difficult.
And
to
use
really
the
get
rush
a good
and the
fight.
Blade as well. That's the pain point. You used both those ultimates. Sure, you forced them out of Redacted, but they've got an overclock still, and it's going to be dueling Sojins here to determine this last submap.
Yeah, and I mean, they are able to get a touch, but they have to go really deep, use a lot of resources to make it happen. And now Doobie with this overclock just kind of gets to zone everyone of Kaiji Core into a corner so that they can just be picked on off. And I mean, there's Saturn going down. The beat does keep the members of KCMX healthy, but I mean, only for a moment, and that's Redacted fighting it back and taking the first map of Oasis.
It felt like it could have gone either team's way at any point. Kaiju Core MX absolutely have the opportunity to be able to just back out, wait until Phoenix's Nemesis form was gone. The Annihilation maybe would have been able to come through, but if you just like chilled for a little bit and then re-engage as we saw them do earlier in the submap, they would have been able to make that fight look a lot cleaner towards the end. With it being so close towards the end of the round, though, already about 85-90% by the time they were able to touch, it was just a little bit too little too late. It's a matter of, we need to go in, but also we need to wait until their cooldowns expire. They were able to get out the Coalescence in the previous fight, but they weren't able to get out more ultimates. It kind of feels like they were a little bit too passive. They were willing to play the counter and kite the ultimates a little bit too much. You want to bait Redacted into making misplays, not give them the advantage and just, you know, okay, they used one Coalescence, sure, but we've got 3 other ultimates that we can just hang on to. So I think for KCMX, they need to acknowledge, like, yeah, we've got really good tempo play overall, but we also need to be aware of, like, when can we just kind of int? When can we just feed a little bit on this fight because it doesn't matter to us? And any ultimate that Redacted uses or any cooldowns that Redacted expend, that can be an opportunity for us to then take advantage and swing it back around on them. If all you do is sit there and wait, though, it's the same deal as we saw from Redacted. They're really good at taking that initiative away from you, and when you're in a disadvantageous ult position, you have to force them out before you're going to be able to steal that advantage back away from them again.
Yeah, I think one lesson that really can be learned from the previous series, right, is that if you give Redacted the time and the space to just do what they want to do, it will not end well for you. So starting out with a nice win, and now KCMX, they think Hollywood is this answer, and I think that's a pretty interesting map pick. I think it plays pretty well into the strengths with this Winston composition, but honestly, I don't even think it's that bad for the Ramatra May Reaper composition. I mean, yes, you need to do a bit more rotating, right? Like a bit more like finagling of the map, I guess, right? But you still definitely can make it work. So I think this is an interesting pick, and we'll have to see how this pans out for KCMX.
I mean, for Felix, I know that they're going to be comfortable playing either something like the Winston or the D.Va if it comes down to it. So on Hollywood in particular, where you can just play around the high grounds, constantly go between them, Saturn as well as looks really good on the Genji, you've got the opportunity to just take the position wherever you want. For Redacted, I would actually expect this to be one of their few uncomfortable maps. You can play things like the Sigma, you can play things like the Ramatra. But we've seen that KCMX can take it fast if they want, and those rotations are really where those compositions start to fall apart. If Saturn's able to just find a pick at the start of every single fight, you're going to really struggle to be able to take the advantage. It is going to be Kaiju Core starting out on the attack on this occasion, so I guess the real pain point and the pinnacle that we're going to have to decide is, does Kaiju Core have a strong attack? If they have a strong attack, I would expect their defense to be even stronger. It is a first to four, so again, it's not like you're going to match point if you lose this one, but you don't want to be putting yourself in a situation where winning the next two maps just equalizes, right? You want to be finding those advantages, taking them away wherever possible. Redacted, that's a Mauga. That's a Mauga on defense of Hollywood. I mean, I don't
Oh my,
hate
they're
it.
rolling out on that. That's not a spawn troll. That's
not a spawn troll. That's what they're going for. I mean, I don't despise it, but like we said, Felix is comfortable on the D.Va playing the shooter comp where you can just like Mauga, Torb, Reaper, and hope for the best in terms of your chunk damage. If Kaiju Core just play fast, they can just kind of ignore you, play for a different position. Oh, and then we do our little rotation around. Okay, and then they leap over to the other high ground. You get burned down. It'll be very contingent on what Sandbox and Saturn want to run, but I wouldn't expect this Winston to stick around for long, I'll be honest.
No, I mean, if I'm Felix, I see this comp, I just immediately turn back to spawn. I just have none of it, and I mean, yeah.
I just out of there, guys. We're making the swap. There's a Malcolm on the field.
I imagine, like, if hell exists, right? It's literally playing Winston into that comp. But yeah, Malcolmir. I mean, this is not something we've seen in a little bit. This should be very interesting. Not something I'd really expect from either of these two teams, as Sandbox here just making sure that turret goes down, but I feel a little stuck. We'll be able to go back into Invis. Won't go down, but not before. I mean, Felix has found the counterpart on the Mauga, and I mean, maybe Redacted just weren't ready for their own weapon to be pulled out against them, but that's KCMX starting Hollywood with a nice capture of first.
And a nice play from Saturn, I think picking up 4 in that fight. This Reaper has been absolutely going insane, and you can see it reflected in the ult charge. Almost 90% towards the Death Blossom already. The next highest is Waimi on 52% towards Kitsune Rush. This is definitely something that Kaiju Core can use to tempo play against Redacted, catch them out with a Reaper ult that maybe they aren't expecting. Now that the scoreboards are in the game, it should be the case that Redacted are able to acknowledge that Saturn probably has Blossom, but especially with them being familiar with Reaper in particular as a hero. Nevertheless, if you're able to get on top of them quickly enough, it can still do a lot of damage.
Yeah, just for the moment though, they're gonna kind of chill out, play the objective, as Overwatch is an objective-based game, so they can just push the cart for free. And I mean, honestly, at some point, it's gonna have to be Redacted taking that fight to the cart. But I mean, it's kind of a scary prospect when you don't really have any ults to work with, but I mean, the longer this goes, just the further that cart gets. So now, KCMX finally moving over to the objective, but it's Starry Night caught out first, and Saturn has this Blossom, as we mentioned. It's going to need to be pulled quite soon as Weemi's gone down, so not a lot of heals to work with, but I mean, Saturn's still finding stuff out here, so KCMX very much still in this fight, but I mean, Saturn, no Wraith, very low, going to have to be careful. But I mean, still just has this in the back pocket, but with that hack, they will at least know that that ult is online, so expect Redacted to be ready for that one. But here's the Kitsune Rush, very powerful ultimate, but matched by a cage, but it just gets cancelled with the EMP, and with it, Phoenix just gets burned. I mean, just so many powerful ultimates online here for KCMX, and I mean, this is just like the definition of a snowball.
And this is why we saw the Sombra swaps immediately as soon as these Maugas came online. When you can just use EMP to deny all value from Cage Fight, you'd be crazy not to just run a Sombra here. Saturn using the threat of the Blossom to kind of bait Redacted into looking at them over and over and over again. But it's really Felix, Sandbox, and Hollow that you have to be mindful of. Already back to having another sound barrier, and whilst Redacted do have some ultimates on the field, Phoenix now going over to the Sigma and Mariposa on the Ana means that that Nano and that Flux aren't in the next fight. It's 3 for 3, and Starry Night's EMP has to be good to stop this momentum from KCMX.
2B's already down. I mean, even if you go with this EMP, I mean, you're on Sigma. How are you going to walk into this Mauga comp? It will be incredibly difficult. The cage goes down. I'm not even sure if it caught anyone, but it will be an EMP and a beat to match, and that nade from Mariposa is just massive. That will be the difference maker in this fight. I mean, otherwise, that beat comes through. KCMX would be nice and healthy, but I mean, with a nice nade, Redacted, able to kind of stabilize a little bit here on third.
Really nice EMP from and beat from Starry Night and Moonlight, who were able to just acknowledge, like, okay, the situation, there's a cage fight, we're gonna start losing people. Hollow's beat comes a little bit later, but Saturn and Weemi are both already down, so a little misplay from Kaiju KorMX that was exploited. Now Felix back on the Zarya, the overclock from Doobie to try and counter it.
Yeah, almost finding out the Sombra, but is able to translocate away, so no picks found just yet, but that is the Suzu out, and Phoenix going to be able to walk with this Nano, just doing so much damage, and finally a pick found out here for Redacted, and I mean, that's the Kiriko so low as well, but I mean, Phoenix now on the receiving end of a lot of damage, will have to back off, but they have stopped the pressure, at least for a moment here.
The Zarya is very low indeed. Kaiju KorMX can't afford to lose anyone at the moment. When you want to tempo play around Weemi's Kitsune Rush, Phoenix does now have the Gravitic Flux, but Sandguard should be sitting up on the Sombra to make sure that it can get hacked out if the worst comes to the worst. No EMP, so you do have to be mindful of it, but it's there nonetheless.
And Rush met with
Hacked.
a Flux that's just hacked on up. I mean, that's an excellent play, and now this Blossom is going to have nothing to meet it. Just Phoenix alive, but I mean, can't hang on, and a blistering attack here for KCMX. They're angry after that Oasis.
2 minutes 28 is an immense time bank to close Hollywood out on. This is like a lot of kind of hybrid escort maps with this very polarizing high ground kind of layout. It's kind of rare to actually see a team push all the way to third in the first place. It's very easy to get held on first or second. We see that on maps like Shambali or Circuit, or other maps that more like Dorado, Paraiso, maps where the streets phase can just be so oppressive. KCMX did a really good job of just being able to burn through that constantly, and it really is down to just the way that they've been playing around their ult game. It's one of the few times where Redacted have actually looked kind of sloppy in the way that they're utilizing ultimates. They're using things like Nano and Overclock at the same time, but not in conjunction with one another. You're doing a bunch of damage, sure, but KCMX have had a really good response to all of them. They're backing up when they need to, kiting when it's required, and then re-engaging back in with ultimates of their own. Sandbox God as well, being able to get the hack onto the Flux so that Phoenix just doesn't even get the opportunity.
Yeah.
We could see them actually playing in a side room to try and minimize the likeliness of that Sombra being able to get a good angle, but if Sandbox is there and dedicated, what are you going to do against that? The Sombra just runs so cleanly into the Sigma, it's almost impossible unless you force the hack out early, and that's something that Redacted just weren't really trying to play for, it felt like. KCMX, like you said, they want to make their name known, their cry heard. They're a little bit angry after losing Oasis. That was their map pick, and they, by every right, should have been able to win it. They're proving that to us now.
Yeah, I like this for Redacted. I feel like, while the Mauka comp is rather funny, I feel like it's a bit gimmicky. You're not going to have as much practice on it. It doesn't pan out for them. So now, moving over to something they're probably a bit more familiar with, but I mean, Kaiju Core just pounce immediately on the rotation. I mean, just excellent work, but Redacted have weathered the storm, at least for the moment, so they will be able to continue fighting this, and oh, bit of an overstep there from Holo, will be punished by Starry. And that means Redacted going to be able to move over to this point rather solidly, and I mean, now KCMX probably going to be able to get a retouch, but it's going to be scrappy.
Really quick fight from Redacted means that they're going to be secured on the objective, and Felix going out of mech now means that, yeah, that retouch, though it's there, is just going to be stalling for a little bit of time. Surely this is just clean up as Starry Night finds 2, a little bit of damage coming through to close it out, but at the end of the day, that is just going to be Redacted cleaning up this point. Even as Kaiju Core are doing everything in their power to keep it alive, Phoenix going down meant that there was a small opportunity, but Holo was just so low. And once again, it's the Reapers on first point doing all the work to make sure that the opposing team is caught out. Starry Night now, 91% for the Blossom, 1% better than Saturn was on their attack.
Yeah, and I wonder if, I mean, KCMX, they had that, right? But now, on the receiving end of it, will they be expecting this Blossom, right? If they just pull the trigger with that one early, it could be another fight to keep the momentum going here. But it's the Cole first to come on out, and Starry Night pulls the Blossom at the perfect time, finds 4, and that's Redacted, just going to try and match KCMX's offensive pace.
Now Felix going over to the Zarya as well. Had it for a little while, but we did see that Diva floated at first. Matching each other on the tank roll is Phoenix and Felix. However, the Grav charge is going to be the crucial factor. 62% for Phoenix, but only 40 for Felix, means that Redacted still have the advantage, even after investing.
Yeah, so nice kunai. Mimi almost able to find out that Sojourn. Not quite, though. Has its Kutsune Rush, which is a quite powerful ultimate, and I mean, with Phoenix really low, I mean, they didn't even necessarily need it, but I mean, just to make sure that kill is secured, maybe secure some staggers as well, and we'll find out Doobie, and that's KCMX answering back, at least for a moment.
It was a nice response from KCMX. I liked the Kitsune Rush, to be honest, just to make sure that Redacted couldn't, like, use a sound barrier and an overclock to try and turn the fight on you. Being able to get a proper stall at this point and now control of the high ground is going to give them advantage. If there's one downside to it, it's that you don't really have something like a Sojourn to get full value from the high ground play, but we can see Sandbox already setting up to just try and catch someone out.
Yeah, and oh my... I mean, that's just KCMX. They know what they want to do. They're perfectly ready. They've got the scouting information from Sandbox God, and they just pull the EMP Blossom. I mean, the one thing for Redacted, though, they don't even have time to use any ultimates, and that's 2 just off the table for KCMX quite quickly. So I think this will be a very important fight for Redacted.
That was an incredibly fast fight, like you said, and it does give them the opportunity to just go back in without really having to worry about a burnt time bank. We can see them now actually playing towards the objective, which makes sense when you're not going into a hard hit scan on the high ground, but KCMX can just drop on top.
Yeah, and there's the grab coming on out, will be answered by a beat, and that will keep the members healthy, but that's Moonlight getting Ajax. I mean, that beat was crucial to the fight for Redacted, and I mean, Doobie, I think it's a little late to be popping this. I mean, they're all just going to run at you, and sure, Saturn goes down, but I mean, that's not really much. Just a drop in the bucket, and I mean, now things look scary for Redacted Ka.
I mean, you say they look scary. There's still 2 minutes left. This is plenty of time to be able to build up to another ult bank. Kaiju Core MX, they've got really good ult cycling overall, but now without a sound barrier, if you can just land like one good DPS ultimate or a decent like coalescence even, you're going to be able to do at least something with it. The pain point is going to be that you used your own beat, you Ajaxed it, and now Felix just gets a free grav. You're going to be pushing this time bank to its limit.
Yeah, and I mean, these members just come up, they're not ready for the grav, and it just is ready for them, and Starry Night pulls the Blossom, and I mean, maybe this is winnable, but I mean, if KCMX can just hold on here, you'd really be missing that piece, but Starry Knight will have none of it. Is able to find a few more pickoffs and force KCMX to regroup at least for the moment, but I mean, they've still got the members to be fighting this out on the cart. The hack goes in, force the Reaper back, and I mean, yeah, Redacted going to be wanting that Blossom back.
Yeah, Wimi as well, being able to come back in with the Kitsune Rush means that if Redacted stayed on the cart, they would have outstayed their welcome and very quickly got run down. Only 60 seconds left now, and like you said, using that Blossom there, you're going to want it back, because you may not even have time to build up to another before you're in that last fight territory.
Yeah, now Rush, EMP, Blossom, KCMX have all the tools to finish this off, and they're going to run on in with the Rush first, the Cole to try and do something about it, but it gets cancelled by Sandbox God. And that's Moonlight going down. The one saving grace, Saturn not able to get a chance to use that Blossom, and that will be key. I mean, things look desperate for Redacted Cobb, but that one pick and Starry Knight running in on this Reaper will mean that with 30 seconds remaining, they are able to get that capture on second point.
Yeah, it's going to be very unlikely that Kaiju Core are going to be able to touch. They go for it nonetheless. There's only 1.5 meters and they're going to lose players for it. Sun doesn't even get a chance to use the Blossom, but staggering out here means that that time bank just gets burned down a little bit. And when you're playing towards third point, there's not necessarily a position that you're giving up here when you do this. So, a little bit of a time bank burn. Redacted are going to be going into third with less time already than KCMX had, but realistically, if you can put the nail in the coffin of this map before third point is capped out, that's exactly what KCMX are going to want to do. So, a close hold here to try and force ultimates out of Redacted, and then counterplay it afterwards by just, at the very last moment, investing your own. That's exactly what you're going to want to be hoping for, but at the moment, KCMX playing a little bit passive and giving over quite a lot of distance on that card.
Yeah, so Saturn now with this Blossom going to be looking to do big things with it. Wraithing on in, gets the beat, but honestly might not even need it, but pulls it through anyways just to be sure. And I mean, getting loads and loads of kills. I mean, I really like the Reaper guy, very powerful, 2 shotguns, you know the drill.
I really like the Reaper guy, but I really don't like using the ultimate there. It was kind of the opposite of what I said, where you give up some distance then invest ultimates, but Redacted don't get baited into using any. Now they're going to be able to come into this next fight with 5, when all you have is a grab to try and shut them down. One good fight for Redacted here means that they basically just get to cap out the points.
Yeah, but there will be a stall fight, so honestly, if KCMX can just burn this time bank, even if they lose third, that does mean that they can't lose the map at the very least, and Starry Knight going in with the Blossom will get 3, so KCMX, I mean, honestly, I think they gave a bit too much push on the cart away, and now, I mean, they'll barely get a touch with this Lucio. The Kiri as well has to use the Suzu, so we'll just get frozen on up. I mean, that Blizzard is just massive for them, but the grab will be responded with a beat, and they will survive, but I mean, if they can just stall a little bit more, I mean, 0 seconds, this map is now unwinnable for Redacted Cobb, but they can still get a draw if they're able to hold on first for their second defense.
This is kind of like the second best outcome for KCMX. If you'd played your ults a little bit better and acknowledged third as being a little bit less important for you to just like play around the positions perfectly and play around the angles perfectly and just be like, okay, at the start, let's just donk walk at them and see if they use an ultimate and be silly. And then at the end, we use our own, and that's when we really try and invest. If they kind of done the opposite of what they actually did, which was play super safe and careful, like halfway through third, and then just have to like throw themselves on the point at the end, there was a very real possibility that we don't even go to a round 3 here. But at least getting it down to overtime means that, yeah, it's no longer winnable for Redacted, and KCMX get 2 minutes, 30 seconds to just find a singular tick. Redacted Car have to be very careful about the way that they use their own ultimates here, because as with every drawable situation, anything you use on the defense is an advantage that Kaiju Core can then find later on. The pain point for them is, if you trade back in the process, you're giving Redacted an even playing field when, realistically, you can just make this defense a living hell for them.
Yeah, so will be interesting to see if Redacted can hold on, and I mean, honestly, it would be great for them if they can, because honestly, I feel like it's almost more painful to draw here than if Redacted had won, right? Because, I mean, KCMX, if they're not able to win this, it was in their sights just a tick away, so I think it'll be really important, not just for the scoreline, but for their mentals to be able to win this out.
Saturn starting on the Genji this time, and Sandbox got immediately coming out on the Sombra. You know that EMP is just like a fight win condition automatically.
Yeah.
When you've got time to work with, you can just take quick fights to try and build ultimates now. Redacted are going to have to use them to play the defense. We're actually seeing a full swap. Okay, there's the Mauga Reaper that we are now somewhat familiar with once again, and it's just going to be the same as before. I'm imagining Saturn's going to want to run in, kill 4, and just win out the map.
Yeah, I mean, this Ramattra going to be taking a lot of damage if ever going into that Nemesis form, but I mean, not going to pull the trigger on that quite yet. And that's Saturn, who is potentially one of the carries, the focal points of this KCMX comp. Going down early will mean that they'll just have to leave the fight for the moment, and that will also mean Redacted building up to ults faster than KCMX can.
Doobie's walls have to be well placed to make sure that any kind of back and retreat from Kaiju Koremex is as misplayed as possible, but an early one gives them the go button.
Yeah, and that's Saturn finding the Moira. That's a lot of healing off the table, but will go down for it. But I mean, that just is how the cookie crumbles, how the dam opens here for Redacted Ka, and it's just a May, and the ice block on the point does build up the blizzard rather fast, but it doesn't matter if everyone's frozen. There's probably not going to be anyone to touch. Mariposa just barely going to be making it, but I mean, just some stragglers will be cleaned on up, and KCMX secure Hollywood.
Nice little retouch there, almost from the Doomfist. The swap comes through just to try and make it happen, but from Kaiju Core MX, that was a really good response. Doobie uses the wall a little bit early. You normally want to be using that when, like, the Cardiac Overdrive from the Mauga is already burned. It's very similar to the Ramattra's Nemesis form, where the Mauga kind of has to use it to sustain. You just don't give them anything to shoot at so that you still have the advantage.
Yep.
You back out, you re-engage. But on this time, we use the wall to try and, like, cut the team off as they're pushing through the choke. It's not quite wide enough to be able to make that happen, gets caught off. So the rest of KCMX can still just flood through anyway. And once that big deterrent is out, it's just the floodgates, like you said. The door is opened and KCMX spill out all over into the objective. Saturn goes in deep but finds Mariposa, and with the advantage of having the attacker side respawns being close to the point as well, even if you get traded out for that, as Saturn did, it's not the end of the world. You lose the Moira. That's the main staying power for that Ramatra composition, and it's just a May Ice Block left. Like you said, the Blizzard was built quickly, but everyone's frozen on the point when there's no one left to contest it, so the percentage is still building, and the final tick goes the way of KCMX. Yeah, as expected, this is going to be a matchup that goes the distance I can imagine. We've already had, what is that now, 5 rounds after 2 maps, so yeah, or no, 6 rounds even after 2 maps. So we're going the full way this time. This is, if there was ever going to be a matchup, probably the one that will take us to 7 of 8 maps at the end of the day. Which means that as we get to our 3rd map, I believe we're going to be going to New Junk City. Again, as I led in last time for Redacted. There you go. Words are difficult. It's important to remember that this is kind of Redacted's home playing field, especially if they go towards that Ramatra kind of Moira Reaper look that they've been floating and have shown themselves to be comfortable on. I imagine New Junk City is going to be a comfortable map pick for them, and there's a reason why they're taking KCMX here rather than a map like Suravasa, which a lot of teams do actually tend to prefer of the 2 Flashpoint picks. So for Redacted, you can be a little bit confident going into this next map.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be really important because I talked about, like, one of the things that really matters in this first to 4 earlier is the stamina, but another one that's going to be so crucial is the momentum, right? And so for KCMX to kind of shut Redacted Ka down there on Hollywood, that's great, but now it's on Redacted to kind of do the same to KCMX, right? To try and take this map, stop any roll going here for their opponents, right, would just be great for them. Also get the lead in the series, right? And I mean, as you said, Flashpoint, kind of their home turf, so I mean, you should expect them to try and kind of bring this back here on New Junk City.
They aren't actually going to be starting on that Ramatra composition, coming out once again on the Junker Queen, which, if you're playing for those fast explosive fights, I think you're going to have something of an advantage on, but Kaiju Koremex have absorption tools to be able to live this if they just don't get based into playing too fast of a tempo. Bubble's already used is going to give an opportunity for Phoenix, but so low on the Junker Queen.
Yeah, I mean, just so much damage going in from this Zarya. I mean, as the fight goes on, just more and more energy for more and more damage. And now with the Junker Queen gone, it's really just the bits and pieces here to fall for Redacted Cod. Will be traded. Hollow going down. It's a little too aggressive, so Redacted can kind of just chill out here on the outskirts, and I mean, they will probably need to give over that capture, but I mean, Phoenix on the way back on the Ramatra, they will be able to kind of fight back into this in an extended fight.
Wimi's still here on the Kiriko, though, to make sure the KCMX are able to keep themselves nice and healthy, and as we can see, Starry Night trying to find an angle, the Tracer goes very low, recall is already forced, so you're going into this next fight without cooldowns already.
Yeah, and I mean, as this goes on, I mean, the point just going to keep ticking up here for KCMX, but kill onto Sandbox God is a good start. Pulse Bomb almost finding its mark, but it's a nice little Wraith form used there, and again, just like the value of this Zarya composition, just as the fight goes longer and longer, I mean, your health bars are just going to keep getting chunked down, and Redacted Ka, I mean, it's really only been one long fight, and I mean, with that stagger, that could just be KCMX taking first here on NJC.
Yeah, I'd imagine Arena is just going to go their way. I think if Redacted wants to be able to try and recontest, they'd have the opportunity to do so, but with what ultimates are you going to make it happen? You've got the overclock, but you want to be setting up to make that actually get good value. We can see them here just waiting, sticking around just to see what the next flashpoint is. The real strategy is to stay in the spawn room to see if you can get that little counter swap into this one, but they're positioned around it anyway, so who cares? They're just lucky that Kaiju Core didn't want to press the advantage and find a little bit of poke going over to the next one. As we go over to the ducts, it's again a fortunate spawn for KCMX. This is closer to their spawn than it was to Redacted, so they've postured themselves up on the objective already. We can see they've got the Blossom, the Grav, and the Beat already to hand, so even one of those ultimates would be enough to secure the defensive position and their cap on this second flashpoint.
Yeah, Redacted trying to walk in on the right, but they leave Doobie main with the overclock. I think this is a smart play, but if KCMX just are able to walk on in there, they could escape Doobie's angle, but that does mean they are going to be stuck in this corridor. But I mean, all of them grouped up. Saturn pulls the Blossom, but it's an excellent boop there from Moonlight to just completely shut it down, and now they're trying to deal with Doobie here off to the side. Sandbox God is able to get that pick off, but I mean, it doesn't even matter in the end. The damage already done, and that's Redacted Ka starting off with first capture on this point.
And it feels like you could have waited for Redacted to actually push in before you used things like the Blossom to try and find value. Sandbox God trying to get on top of Doobie as well was a nice play to make sure that that off-angling Sojourn was dealt with, but when you do something like that, you've got to be mindful of the fact that your main hit scan damage is no longer with the rest of the team, so KCMX playing really close, but not necessarily as a full unit, a little bit of a misplay.
Yeah, but now the overclock of their own coming out forces the Reaper away, but I mean, not for long. Shut down is Sandbox God, and I mean, the rest of the pieces are now going to just fall, but Felix has other ideas on this Zarya, fully charged up, getting a Kiriko pocket, just beaming everyone. But now, I mean, the Kiriko so low will go down, but has entirely done her job of keeping Felix alive to just beam everyone down from Redacted Ka, and that is why you run the Zarya.
Use the Kitsune Rush just kind of as an investment tool to make sure that the team won the fight. I don't dislike it, but considering that Phoenix was already so low in the moment, it's one of those ultimates that you're maybe wishing you had back. I don't think it's wrong to use it, but using it so late on, it was maybe just like one of the ones that you could probably have gotten away with. Now Mariposa is going to have the advantage, able to lead into this next fight with the Kitsune Rush of their own, and Starry Knight's going to be able to use it alongside their Death Blossom to really chunk in the damage, where Kaiju Core is still trying to set up this Zarya energy.
Yeah, and I like this from Sandbox God. Now fighting the Sojourn angle a little bit earlier, but we'll have to kind of escape from that angle, and someone who can't escape is Hollow, who goes down to that Blossom, but again, it's the Zarya that seems to really be the difference maker, finding the tank counterpart, and sure, Redacted Ka are up a player, but I mean, this Zarya may as well just be two players at this point, and the Blossom coming on through is good from Saturn as well, finding out two members, and with Doobie about to fall, that is Kaiju Core evening up the score here on Flashpoint.
That's, I mean, evening up the score you say, but it's 2-0 and match point for them, so actually it's going to be going...
I can't see.
Yeah.
I can't read.
It throws you off, right? Because Redacted in the previous series was so dominant, and now we're seeing what is basically them falling apart on, yet again, the map type that I keep trying to say they've previously looked really strong on. Maybe it's going to have to be the opposite storyline from here on out. Maybe Flashpoint has suddenly become Redacted's weakest map type. Because whilst they do have some ultimates online here, if Kaiju Corps play this cleanly, they can bait one out, re-engage with something like the Beat or a Kitsune Rush that they can farm for, and take third cleanly as well.
Yeah, I mean, this grab could be the thing that gets that going for them, as they're going to run on in. They will trade favorably, but I mean, Phoenix still in this Nemesis form, trying to do all that they can, but so low, and now a Pete just to kind of add insult to injury. Look how high our health bars are. You now have none. And now they're going to move over to the point. There is a capture here for Redacted Call, which could make a little bit of a difference, but I mean, only of about 10% or so.
And Mariposa and Doobie just kind of left along on the sidelines, able to just keep throwing in damage, find the trades evenly. Using the beat from Hollow, I don't think was a bad call. 20% goes Redacted's way without them having to invest anything at all, though. So you were kind of hoping that you would either take the fight fast and use ultimates to get all the initial percentage, or not use ultimates, take it slow, and be able to trade it back eventually. Now Redacted have the ult advantage in terms of their economy, and they're probably looking to use Mariposa's Kitsune Rush to claim back this point.
Yeah, now, I mean, Phoenix kind of left on a bit of an island there, goes so low, and Moonlight tries to go in and save them, and falls for it, and, I mean, eventually Phoenix still goes down anyways, and, I mean, silver lining is only that that fight was so fast that Redacted have one more chance here on New Junk City to try and stay in this map.
Stagger onto Mariposa, though, means that it really is just last fight territory. They're going to have to go so fast, and whilst they've held on to ultimates, we saw them trying to kite and failing to do so. They have to just go uber aggressive here and fully take the initiative if they want to stay in this map.
Yeah, but I mean, the grab, are they even going to be able to touch? I mean, no, they're not.
I mean, everyone ran it down main instead of just having someone go off on their own to make sure that you could touch the point. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
KCFX, they just have the ults to hold that choke, and Redacted Ka not quite ready for it, and I mean, this one's gonna hurt. I mean, we've said this is their map type here, but blown out.
Yeah, in Major 3, that was Milani's favorite little calling card. Like, hey, by the way, Redacted, even as they've lost matches, have never lost a Flashpoint map before. And it was true. It was true. I messed up my Blizzard, and they were able to win their Flashpoint there as well. But now we're seeing frequently in this kind of run of today that it feels like Flashpoint has kind of started to get away from them. Maybe just all of their opponents have been studying them the whole time and seeing, well, if Redacted are really good at Flashpoint, why don't we just learn from them and do what they do? It feels like Kaiju Corps MX have had a really good understanding of when to play ultimates, when to take position. There have been mistakes that Redacted could have exploited, but they're just not always quite on the same page, wanting to kite away from a fight, but not doing so fast enough to actually find the value, not wanting to use counter ultimates if you don't need to, but then finding yourself in unforced last fight territory. It's an unfortunate and rough position to be in for a team where you think you're doing the right thing, and fundamentally you would be, but the execution just isn't quite perfect enough to make it work. So you'd almost be better off doing the strategically slightly worse thing and knowing that you can at least find some result of it. We're going to be going to a quick break. I'm going to be taking a quick rest alongside Fifi, and then we will be back to continue this series. Kaiju Corps currently 2-1 up over Redacted. Looks like it's going to go the distance.
Hello and welcome back to the Kunoichi Kommotion NA Rising series. We're here in the grand finals. 2 maps unanswered from KCMX. Redacted gonna have to figure something out to find their way back into the series.
I mean, it is only 2-1. You've lost the last couple of maps, but, like, it feels like Redacted, despite my own understanding. I've been struggling a little bit on Flashpoint, and then previously it was Hollywood, which was KCMX's map choice. It's not the end of the world here, and in this first to 4 kind of setup, 2-1 is kind of almost expected at a certain point. Like, you're going to have to give up a couple of maps against a strong opponent, so if you're able to now win the next few, you're going to put yourself in good stead, especially with us now going over towards a little bit more of a standardized map type. We are not going to be seeing Clash, as Fifi and I were maybe talking about. We will be going over to Push. It's your regularly scheduled... It could have been
so funny, Willow.
I know, but it's your regularly scheduled, normal, sensible map types where the color caster also gets to say things. I'm so sorry. We're probably... I think it's Colosseo. I know.
I'm so
but I think
sad.
it's going to be Colosseo that we're going over to our next map. Are you sad to see Colosseo? Do you not like it?
Well, maybe I'll like it more when they finally remove the glass, but...
Remove the glass!
For the moment, I mean, I imagine, regardless of whatever comps we see coming out here, I mean, a lot of standing in the neutral position here, but I don't know, maybe we'll see some wacky and wild hijinks from one of these teams.
Well, I imagine for Redacted, this is going to give them good opportunity to go back to this, like, Sigma, Ana, Illari composition that they floated on previous maps, and in the last series in particular. Colosseo is really good for those long angles, and we were running a similar thing with our own flex support of just, like, let's just get the Illari going if we can, right? If we can get away with it. So, I think for Redacted, that will probably be what we see from them. For Kaiju Core, more of the Zarya wouldn't go amiss there. Starting out on the Doomfist, maybe, but... I think if you can just run the Zarya into something like that, where you've got a lot of hit scan and plenty of opportunity to build energy, plenty of angles that you can play around, you're going to put yourself in good stead when Redacted are eventually forced to have to walk forwards to make the push bar actually go anywhere. Unless we're just going to see another 10 minutes of everyone sitting in main, 20 meters go to either side, and no one really wants to push into the other.
Yeah, observers, if that happens, can we get a time lapse going? Live time lapse. Imagine. But no, we will be seeing the Sigma coming out here from Redacted Ka, which will mean that they should have more of this pokey damage. So KCMX going to have to at some point pull the trigger, try and get something happening, and they are already creeping up on the right side, maybe looking for a bit of a push over there, but no, just kind of returning to normal, I was about to say, but there is a Sojourn at 180 degrees behind your team. What is Sandbox God cooking up here? I mean, has caused the whole team of Redacted to look behind, and I mean, Starry Night looking behind, but not in the right spot. Will it go down first? But now they're trying to answer onto Sandbox. Will get bubbled up, and I mean, this is a great opening here for KCMX. They pull out something completely unexpected, and now trying to route Redacted Ka, but only able to push them back so far. Phoenix, though, trying to go back in a little bit too early and will be punished for doing so.
We can see Sandbox still posturing up on that high ground with the Sojourn, and this is exactly what we said that NDA Inferno needs to be doing in the previous series, and what we were highlighting from Kaiju Core on that first submap of Oasis, it's angles. This shooter comp that they want to run, where they just have, like, Sigma, Ana, Illari, and they just want to run it down main every single time, you just put your Sojourn on an off angle, force them all to turn around. Even if your Sojourn doesn't find huge value initially, Felix then just gets to walk on for free because the Sigma's no longer paying attention to the Zarya. An early pick from Doobie, but forward spawn almost already found.
Yeah, I mean, it's fortunate, though, for Redacted Ka that they're able to take this fight fast enough, because if they had given up that checkpoint so early into the map, I mean, that would have been a... I'm sorry, I faster cursed it. This is my fault. I claim full responsibility. I'm the one liable for this. I understand that, but they will get the stagger. No, never mind.
Nope.
Never mind.
You cast a curse that too. I can't believe you hate you. In fact, you got Doobie killed.
I'm just not allowed to
that
speak.
was you. Look what you've done.
You know what, Willow, can you handle it? You can solo cast this, right?
Sure. Stagger kill
for Redacted's sake.
now down their Sojourn, which is going to give Sandbox God full opportunity to be able to pull this overclock. Play onto the aggressive Phoenix. We can already see is so low on that Sigma. The Nano Boost comes out just to make sure that their tank doesn't die. And eventually Phoenix does find Sandbox God. We know that this Sigma goes incredibly hard when the Nano Boost is in there, and it's given them time to build up to a Gravitic Flux as well. The Tectonic Shock from Starry Night just to try and put the nail in the coffin of this fight. It feels like Redacted are a little bit upset that they got that forward spawn taken away from them quite as early as they did, and now they're answering back in force. But it's going to be an ultimate that maybe they wish they still had going into next fight.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to actually make you solo cast.
I'm fine, don't worry.
Excellent work though, and excellent work from Redacted. They're able to get some meterage on board to try and answer back here to KCMX, but they do have a big lead, so we'll be needing some early picks like that to try and bring this back into their advantage.
Felix has this grab if they want to just stall out on the bridge. If you can play forward and just rely on Weemy and Hollow to sustain you out, you can stall the bot without actually having to drop down, but you're going to have to start posturing up for it relatively soon. Here we can see them forcing back Doobie and Moonlight on the high ground. Overclock comes out from Doobie, but it's going to be cancelled out.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the Flux coming on in, but just onto Felix really, and will be bubbled on up, but still able to be burned out in the end. A very scrappy fight here, but I mean, this Sigma still being online just gives you the point presence, and Redacted, they give up that checkpoint early, and I mean, they don't care at all. They respond in kind, have their own, and they're probably going to be able to take the lead off this as well.
Everyone from Redacted solo, but Kaijuku kind of give up the high ground advantage that they'd had. Felix as well holding on to the Graviton Surge means that whilst you do hold that ultimate, you've lost the lead for it. You're going to have to use it just to equalize now.
Yeah, but I mean, it is still nice to have that tool available. Oh, Saturn onto 1 HP for a second there. Has the Blossom, will be very important to keep that player alive here. I mean, speaking of keeping players alive, Felix going to so low, and now with the Nano and no bubbles available, I mean, Felix, just not much left for her to do, but there is a Blossom here, so Saturn potentially would be able to fight back into this, but I mean, just going to choose the measured play and back off, but I mean, now this lead just keeps building for Redacted.
And that's the key point. Like, we can see Felix is wanting to wait until Phoenix uses Grasp to be able to pop this Graviton Surge, knowing that the Sigma can eat it if you're not careful. But by being so careful, you're not giving your team opportunity to push in. A nice first pick onto Mariposa gets traded, but it's the opportunity they needed.
Yeah, and I mean, they really needed that, right? I mean, if this bot just keeps on going here for Redacted, it just gets harder and harder to stem the bleeding. But they are able to do that. They are able to fend those members off of the bot and able to at least get back to fighting in a neutral. But I do agree, Felix does need to loose this grab at some point.
Starry Night stores the bot for a little while as well, which means that the remaining members of Redacted are going to be able to fight this on main with that forward spawn advantage. But we're still looking at this Blossom grab. There's Grasp.
Yeah, I mean, that should be the go button. They use Rush, they use the grab finally, and Phoenix, I mean, so low, should be punished here and will be, but I mean, many members of Kaiju Corps already down, and I mean, they've got the Sojourn on the high ground, they've got the Venture on the ground, but I mean, will go down playing a little bit too close, but I mean, because of all the members they lost, KCMX can't gain any more ground because of this.
I mean, they could if they could just route into that inside building. We can see the doors there. You can keep pushing the bot from this angle without just standing there and giving up all of the space. Please, you just won the fight. No, I'm so sad. And now Redacted Car are going to be able to come back in with almost every ultimate without any distance gained for Kaiju Corps.
Yeah, now they're in a pretty awkward position as well. I mean, it's pretty difficult to take a fight here, and I mean, Saturn figuring out why that nade just instantly on in, and the long angle for the Venture ult to come in, and I mean, the members of KCMX get just so split up by all the pressure that Redacted were putting out, and I mean, it looked for a second there like they were going to be able to start getting more distance to try and take the lead back, but I mean, we're right back towards their spawn.
And Redacted only had to use one ultimate to make it happen, just the Tectonic Shock from Starry Night in conjunction with a nice anti-nade from Mariposa. Redacted now still have 4 ultimates. There's the Nano and the Captive Sun. Flux is going to come out first, and the Blossom is good.
Wow. I mean, Saturn just taking the perfect timing. And I mean, that is so important for them. I mean, if they have to use a bunch of ults here just to, you know, get back to the neutral fight again, I mean, it's just so difficult. But we'll just be the Blossom, and now using that opportunity to swap over to the Echo. That's an interesting swap.
I think when you're playing the Echo and you're going into something like the Sojourn and the Venture, you're not necessarily worried about, like, if you're going to get poked out by that kind of hit scan that you'd usually have to be scared of with a Cass or an Ashe, because the Sojourn has to build up to the rail, the Venture has to really spend every cooldown to get up to you. Sandbox Guard is so low.
I mean, the beat comes out, but it's just not in time, and I mean, even with the beat, Doobie's still just killing everyone here on the Sojourn. I mean, Kaiju Core MX gonna try and do their best to get a couple picks back their way, but I mean, cleaned up. And I mean, at some point this cycle has to break, right? Like, it's just KCMX are sent back all the way, and Redacted get a little bit of meterage, then go back to a neutral, and then a little bit of meter. They need to at some point break through.
And that's the problem when you gave over that, like, a fight that you really shouldn't have for Kaiju Core way back when Felix was holding the Grav until they could guarantee a good usage of it. Because you did that, you're now down to the last 60 seconds or so, but you're also 40 meters down in terms of distance. You did manage to get Butt Scratch, so you at least don't have to worry about that animation, but every ultimate you invest at this point is one you won't have when overtime comes through.
Yeah, and I mean, they invest 2 immediately, and you've got to be careful of this Venture behind you. Will eventually get the pick, but trade it out for it, and that should be KCMX winning this fight. But I mean, we mentioned it, right? These ultimates so important as time goes on into this, what will be an overtime push, and they had to use 2 right out of the gate there that they just won't have online anymore.
That stack-up is so important for Kaiju Core to be able to get to just try and recover the kind of disadvantage they're going to be in now that they're playing into a Gravitic Flux, a Tectonic Shock, and a Sound Barrier. They don't have any kind of defensive ults for themselves, nor a rush that they can use to try and set the tempo, so Felix's Grav is yet again the real pain point for the team.
Whew. That's a nice sleep. I don't know if there will be any follow-up onto it. I think Saturn just going to be able to survive, but there's the Tectonic Shot, and Sandbox and Weemy will not be able to survive themselves going down. This Venture can be such a tricky character to play against, picking up 3 in this fight, and the remnants of KCMX removed from the bot, and Redacted Ka evening us back up at 2-2 after Colosseo.
And yet again, Felix just holds Grav, doesn't even use it at the end of the map there, dies with it to close out Push. I'm forgetting my map names.
Flash.
When you don't... No, we're on Hanaoka right now. What are you talking about? When you just don't want to use the Grav because you're so scared of it getting countered out, what you're doing is telling your opponents that even if they use resources, you're still not going to grab them. So they don't have to be scared. They can just play as though you're never going to use it at any point ever. I believe we did only see 1 throughout that entire map. 10 minutes with only 1 Graviton Surge used is criminal. Maybe 2, but like, that's an ultimate that you can get like 3 or 4 off of consistently, especially when you're playing that high damage Zarya into something like the Sigma. Felix had the damage output to be charging that kind of every other fight, but just didn't want to use it, was waiting for the perfect time every single time. And like you said, if you just leave Redacted to do their thing, they're eventually going to run you down. The Tectonic Shock comes through, you could have caught that Venture in the Grav, the Sigma gets to use his own Flux, you could have caught the Sigma in the Grav. It's like, frustrating over and over again when this one ultimate is the only thing that you have as your win condition and you just elect not to use it at all. Yeah, the map is going to go away from you, and now it's Redacted, as you said, tying it up 2-2 as we start looking towards Escort. Escort is a map type with an interesting map pool. It's got some real... I mean, the particular one for Kunoichi I kind of like. There's like Root, there's Rialto, alongside maps like Shambali and I believe Junkertown as well. So it's not just like Circuit, Shambali, Junkertown, right? Enjoy playing Widowmaker all the time.
Like, anytime someone says those maps, we should go, boo, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like Circuit,
like,
boo.
But there's decent variation here, which I'm somewhat fond of, and it's going to give KCMX the opportunity to take us to a map that isn't necessarily going to be entirely in Redacted's favor when they like this, like, Ashe Sojourn or, like, Tracer Sojourn with the Ana Ilari so much. And we are going to be seeing us go over to Rialto. This is a map where you can play things like the Diva or the Winston, I think Orisa also works well here, but honestly, both of these teams seem to have a kind of distaste for Orisa, which is honestly fair enough. The hero is a little
I'm
bit
here
dull,
for
and I'm
it.
glad to see some variation going on. But at the end of the day, again, you're here to win, so there must be a confidence issue there more so than anything else, rather than just honorable
No.
no Orisa.
Yeah, and I think Rialto is really an interesting map because I think it still allows Redacted to lean into this Sigma if that's what they want to go for. But I mean, I think Winston has an easier matchup into the poke comp than the Zarya does, right? So I think this is definitely a good pick for KCMX if they can get back on that Winston, keep running circles around Redacted. They could bring themselves up to match point here.
And for Redacted, I think it's a good opportunity to see the varying playstyles that they can bring around with their compositions. I don't imagine we'll be seeing anything necessarily new from them, but it'll be nice to see maybe an iteration on the way they play it, because I think if they don't, it'll go much the same way as Hollywood did, where KCMX just kind of roll through you, and even if you're able to cap out third, it's such a huge disparity in time bank that realistically the map is always going to go KCMX's way. For either team, it's a matter of saying, like, if you're good at payload, KCMX wants to prove that they're still good at payload. For Redacted, they want to prove that, like, just because there's a payload in the map doesn't mean they're automatically going to lose. And one of the key points that you mentioned before that's really going to come into play is fatigue and the stamina that it takes to go the distance on these really long series. Redacted have now been in for, like, an insane number of rounds just in this singular series because we keep going to extra rounds and more sub-maps and things. And then they also had to play the series before as well, even if it was a 3-0. It's just a lot of Overwatch to have to be playing all at the same time, and when you're just drawing it up for 2, you know there's at least 2 more maps in this series. So for Redacted, they've just got to keep doing what they're doing, playing it standard. For Kaiju Core, they're going to be a little bit fresher.
Yeah. And I mean, as this series goes on, I mean, KCMX, sure they didn't have to play the series before, but I mean, the first 4 series are still really long, and it's a lot of playing, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see as things continue, right? When things start to, like, break down, who can get the better of those scrappy fights.
You can see both teams kind of mirroring a Sigma composition at the moment, which was kind of not what we were expecting when we went over to Rialto, but KCMX proving flexibility in a way of showing off a composition that we'd usually expect from Redacted. Starry Night already so low, this Ashe has to not fall here if they want to keep this pressure up, as KCMX just rolling through.
Yeah, I mean, Felix getting really aggressive, just walking past Phoenix, not caring at all, and going for a rock, but Mariposa will be the one to draw first blood. That's not something you see every day, a BAP killing a Widow, but I mean, if it works, it works, and it's going to be Redacted off to a strong start.
Sandbox God takes a really aggressive angle to just try and find some nice picks as Kaiju Core push forward, but one of the key things about the Sigma comp is that you're also backing at the same time, and Starry Night is going to be wishing she backed a little sooner in that instance.
Yeah, and I mean, this is why we saw them deal with Sandbox God so early last fight, is because unanswered, I mean, you're just going to lose members, right? And I mean, now looking for a little bit more here on the Widow, just, oh my god, I feel so bad for Phoenix, just like, looks like just perfectly healthy, gets hit by a Widow Dink, gets hit by a rail, and all of a sudden that's 500 plus health just gone in an instant. And that'll lead to KCMX 5 minutes going to second.
Starry Night comes back on the Widowmaker, does actually manage to get the best of Sandbox God, a little bit of a surprise Widow jump, hey, damage comes through, but now KCMX are going to be expecting it, and they've got the advantage in terms of this Infrasight duel, which we can see Redacted responding to by just walking backwards. Now you have to be scared of getting shot in the head and losing second because of it.
Yeah, and I mean, when it's Sandbox God who has these sights, I mean, you can see why you should be scared. Starry Night caught out there by the Widowmaker, and I mean, that just gives a lot of space over here for KCMX to work with, as now Sandbox God going for an aggressive angle, maybe perhaps a little bit too much so, will go down for it. But I mean, was still pushing there for KCMX, but now that their Widow's gone, probably gonna just chill, wait, see if they can get anything found out here, but it's a window from Redacted that will really send KCMX back.
This spacing is going to give the opportunity for Sandbox to get set up, and we could, for Starry Night to get set up. And we can see Doobie hunting for Sandbox on their respawn as well, so Redacted know how they want to play this, but investing that window gives Hollow the opportunity to just use one of their own. Trank forced early means that they're probably going to have to invest it.
Yeah, now that Trank not available here for the Flux, which is going solo out onto the Zen, a Sun for good measure will be just removing the health bars of the last couple of players here for Kaiju Core MX, and they're all going to be sent back to their spawn as some nice shots here from Moonlight on the Iliari, and Redacted Ka looking pretty solid here on second point.
But Redacted did have to use pretty much every ultimate they had just to maintain their lead. And Kaiju Core actually good discipline to not use any ultimates in their own stead, right? They've still got their Flux, they've still got their window. Now all they need to worry about is Starry Night's Infrasight, which will build up in about 10% or so. So Sandbox God finding another early pick on this Widow Duel will be critical to making sure that the Kaiju Core MX can find good value from things like their Flux and from their Amplification Matrix without dying early.
I mean, having those outlines, I was so worried for Sandbox God. I was like, please don't peek, please don't peek. Unfortunately, Starry Night pulls the trigger a bit early and gives away her positioning. So we'll just be all even coming into the start of this fight. But I mean, Redacted Ka have to be a little bit worried, have to back off of these stairs, and now it is Starry Night actually finding that pick off, winning out the Widow duel. And I mean, you were saying really one of the only possibilities here for KCMX was if Sandbox God found counterpart, but not going to happen. Although now Mariposa a little bit out in the open, very, very low, but survives long enough for Felix to go down. But Saturn still believes in the heart of the cards here with the overclock, finding outpost supports, and this window, it's just so much for, I mean, Redacted to have to deal with, but Starry Night coming back, getting the value on the Widow, and now there are lots of targets lifted up into the air for her to be shooting at. Not quite found out just yet, but with that pick on the Baptiste, I mean, KCMX have no hand in this fight anymore.
It's the same story as Push. Kaiju Core are waiting too long to use ultimates, and Redacted are getting to build up their own again because of it. Moonlight almost has another Captive Sun, Doobie almost has another Overclock. You even invested in that fight, you used your own OC, you used your own window, but you didn't use them together, you just pulled them at different times, and it's like grabbing Kaiju Core by the shoulders, yelling into their face like, please, please, if you've got the advantage, just use an ultimate. Nice early pick from Starry Night means that they're not going to yet again, even as the Infrasights come through.
Yeah, I feel like regardless of all the macro play, Starry Night is just online. I feel like winning multiple Widow duels in a row, getting pickoffs in the mid to late fight, I mean, just getting so much done here for Redacted, making it really difficult for KCMX to do anything, and this Sun will also make it difficult for anything to happen, but Transcendence should stop that pressure, at least for the moment. And Doobie, oh my, on 2 HP goes down. And, I mean, that overclock being off the table here does give a chance here for KCMX, but if they wait too long, the respawns are closer for Redacted, and that could be the difference. I mean, Felix had this Flux, but, I mean, Starry Night's already killed your whole back line, and that's going to be all the distance that KCMX can get here on Rialto.
And yet again, we're seeing a one ultimate kind of map for Felix, who only uses the Gravitic Flux when every other member of Kaiju Core is already dead. I can appreciate wanting to get a good ultimate off, but if you don't use them, Redacted will come back and just kill your team. You have to close these fights out faster, because those respawns have been deadly consistently. This is a problem that Kaiju Core have had now for the last couple of maps, and if they want to stay in this series longer than those 2 maps they've picked up, they're going to have to start addressing it, because if you just hold every ultimate that starts with the Grav prefix, you're going to lose every map that you do it on, okay? Genuinely, like, please, just use it, just use it. There's like 3 good fights that you could have used it in that you would have been able to win. You, by every account, should have been able to close out second. You had like 4 minutes going into the Streets phase of Rialto, and we only used Gravitic Flux in the last 3 seconds? It's like, you know? It's I love these teams. I get hyped up. They get my blood boiling and pumped up and everything. But Redacted Car, I mean, they've just kept looking clean. They've kept playing standard. Like you said, Starry Night has looked really good on this Widowmaker, even in instances where Sandbox God has kind of had the advantage at the start of the fight. Starry Night comes back, finds a pick, finds two, completely flips it on their head. We're looking at these members of Kaiju Corps now to play that defensive that Redacted were able to do so efficiently even better, because first point in 96 meters isn't a convincing attack if you want to have this map feel comfortable for you.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, I feel like if I think of points that I would want to defend, Rialto first and second, pretty easy to win out there. So I mean, this is definitely defensible here for KCMX, but one very interesting point here, Saturn has taken over the mantle of the Widow. For a second there, I thought I was misreading again, because I was like, wasn't it Sandbox God on the Widow? But Saturn has taken over that role, so we'll be but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Starry Night still gets the better of that duel.
When you're taking these Widow duels, you have to like peek an angle, change your angle, peek a different one. If you just keep going in the same place, then eventually the other Widow is going to win out, and now Starry Night just gets to have free reign over the rest of your team. Weemy the next to fall, and like you said, if you wanted to have a point to hold on defensive, it would be first Rialto, but as the staggers come through and this prolonged fight keeps going the way of Redacted, it is going to be Kaiju Corps having to give over first, and with an even more convincing time bank than they had themselves.
Yeah, the one thing, Doobie does go down, but I mean, Felix is so low, and the lamp is just a little bit late, so Mariposa going for an interesting jump there might give actually a chance here. Saturn has found two with the rail. I mean, Redacted Ka had no right to lose that, but I mean, Saturn just kills them all.
It feels like Kaiju Corps have almost given up on the Widow duel. They've said, okay, well, if Sandbox is going to play the Ashe, Saturn can go back over to the Sojourn. We'll just try and play the angles in such a way where Starry Night can't just keep killing us, and instead level that damage onto Phoenix, who, even in spite of having the healing of an Ilarian and Baptiste, will eventually get burned down if we just keep throwing in enough out.
No one can hide from my sight.
And now Starry Night. Interesting angle here with the sights. They are not aware, but the shot not quite coming through, and now they know that there's a Widow there. But I mean, this means they can't go back at all. There's no space for them to move. I mean, Hollow just playing with death here, barely staying alive, but it wasn't meant to be. Goes down. The Transcendence is late, and with this window, I mean, should just be a matter of time, the Flux just to make sure, but I mean, Weemy does find out another pick, but I mean, it looks a little scrappy, but Redacted get it done. They get themselves onto second. They've got 4 minutes, so they're looking in a good position to win out this map.
As soon as Starry Night was spotted off on that off angle way behind, the response from Kaiju Corps should have been to just push really aggressively, knowing that they can take it as a 4v5. Instead, Hollow just keeps like jumping back and playing with death, and the eventual damage that gets laid in, even if Starry Night doesn't land a headshot, means the Baptiste cooldown get burned, the health pool is too little, and because you don't push forward like you said, you run out of space. Now Redacted, still in good standing even if they didn't get the first point cap in record speed.
Yeah, now this window from the high ground will force back the members of Redacted and open up an opportunity for Saturn to win out this Sojourn duel, giving a pretty good advantage here for KCMX to hold on here and, you know, get a moment to take a breath, a little bit of respite here, but not for a whole lot of time now, as a re-aggression here. Doobie comes back, instantly takes out the Zenyatta for KCMX, and now a Sun in the back line. I mean, that is ridiculously aggressive. Doesn't even need the explosive damage, just gets it with headshots instead. And careful there's a Bob, but Moonlight able to stay alive, and things seem to be going the way here of Redacted. The kill feed turning up blue as Starry Night now unmatched on the Widow, continuing to get kills, but a little bit aggressive there. Is pocketed, staying alive for the moment. But I mean, Redacted gonna have to at some moment pull the trigger here.
I mean, the trigger that I'm looking at is Felix's Gravitic Flux again. There was a really good opportunity after Doobie was picked to seal out that fight. Now it's Sandbox God putting the entire map on their shoulders, it feels like, at this point already almost capped out.
Yeah, and I mean, with the tank down there, I mean, you're going to need to stall the cart out, but I mean, who's going to do it? And I mean, the answer is, if Phoenix just kills everyone, no one's going to do it. And with the team kill, that's Redacted Ka taking Rialto in style and putting themselves at series point.
Why no use Flux? Why no use Flux? I don't get it. This is yet another map where Felix has ended the map with the ultimate, just not wanting to use it. They had it for like a solid 2 minutes there and just held it and held it and held it. If Redacted don't have to be scared of your ultimate, then they're going to play like you don't have it even when you do, because you're just not going to use it, right? There's one thing of being like, okay, I need to track the rock to make sure they don't stun me out of it, or I need to have my shield set up so that even if I do use it, I can like go up and not get hit by the rock. But if you just don't use your ultimate at all, even when you've got the opportunity to do so, even when you've got the openings, even when you want to press the advantage, Redacted will just get to walk all over you. You're basically playing like 4 ultimates versus 5 ultimates all the time, and I'm looking back at that fight where Doobie was picked and then came back and picked someone else. You could have used the Flux there. Sure, it was a little bit earlier in the round. Sure, you wouldn't have had it when the cart was getting towards the end if you did lose that fight ultimately, but by not finishing off Redacted earlier on, you give them the opportunity to build up ultimates, you give them the opportunity to come in with their own. Phoenix is able to just use their own Gravitic Flux to be able to find 2. Why are we holding them? It really just, it's unfathomable to me. I don't get why we're not using the most powerful tool in your kit. It genuinely was a 1 Flux map, even though the time bank was like 12 minutes throughout that entire round. It's just, man, this has to be something that Kaiju Core address, because genuinely, now they are in match point situation. This series will run away from them, and as we go back over to Control for our next map type, you're not going to get the opportunity to just sit on an ult forever, because those rounds will go quick enough that if you don't use it when you have the opportunity to do so, you'll probably just lose that round outright.
Yeah, but I think on the upside here for KCMX is, I feel like going into Busan here, it's less likely we'll see the Sigma. I think on Sanctuary, it's definitely playable, but I feel like especially on Mecha base, like it's very close. And downtown, I mean, sure, you do still have those longer sight lines, but I mean, if you play Sigma, you're gonna have to play rather close. It's fairly easy to run him down, so I'd expect to see at least less of the Sigma coming in here. So, and I mean, I feel like Redacted looks so rejuvenated since they've played this, right? I think at the start of the series, KCMX looked more in control, right? And then they pull the Sigma out, and ever since, it's just not been going the way of KCMX. And so I think having this map where that Sigma's a little bit more difficult to play, even if they do choose to run it still, right? I think that could give an advantage here for KCMX. And I mean, they need it, right? This is it. This could be the end here for KCMX in the Kunoichi Kommotion, so they're gonna have to make it happen.
And even as you say, the Sigma is less likely. It was the same problem that we saw with the Zarya on Colosseo. So it's not just a unique problem to Sigma in particular. It genuinely is. If there's like a gravity involved, Felix is hesitant to use it, and it's like, I feel like as we go over to Busan, that Zarya is something that is maybe going to be floated. The big question mark for me is, why have Kaiju Core stopped running the Winston? We've gone over to maps where that would be possible, and we've seen them look really good whilst running it. So I don't really know why we've decided that all of a sudden we just want to keep playing this mirror Sigma, when honestly, Phoenix looks really solid on the hero, and Felix's hesitation is kind of reflective of that. When you know that the enemy Sigma maybe has your number if you make a mistake, you are more hesitant to use your kit, because you know that you're going to be punished if you use it badly. It's just, if you're going to be that hesitant about it and that unsure of how to utilize it, play a different hero. And I feel like that's maybe what we're going to have to see be the problem solving that Kaiju Core come up with as we go over to Busan. Starting on Sanctuary, where you could play the Sigma, we are actually going to see the Ramattra floated initially. The question is, does this stay when the spawn doors open?
Yeah, and I think you bring up like a good point, especially for the general team of KCMX, right? As the series goes on, as things start to look harder to win, right? That mental can kind of spiral out of control, and it can cause problems like hesitation, right? The pressure can really get to you, so we'll have to be able to stop those thoughts creeping in the back of your mind, right? Like, what if we can't bring this back? What if I mean, especially, you know, if they were to lose this first point, but I mean, you've got to take it step by step, and that first step is keeping Hollow alive, which they are able to do. I mean, gotta be very careful. Mariposa deadly on this Ana, and now the Ramatra, we're seeing kind of the point. You want to walk in onto this Sigma, and kind of more of just a bait and switch. A Saturn is in your backline, picks off 2, and that will be a good way to start here for KCMX.
And the name of the game is going to be Speed. Redacted's composition really doesn't do well if all the members of Kaiju Corps just run at them incredibly quickly.
Willow, I don't know how, but Starry Knight and Phoenix on 1 HP have managed to get a few picks, so now this is a little dangerous for them.
Palm to the face, palm to the face. I'm going to keep hitting you in the face with my... Just shoot the Venture in the head. Just shoot the Venture in the head, okay? End it. Finish it. I'm sure Felix was thinking the same thing. When you're playing the Ana and now the Mauga as well, it still just gives the same opportunity for Kaiju Corps. As soon as the Cardiac Overdrive is out, you just run on top of this Ana. She can sleep one person, Moonlight can boop another, but Saturn and Sandbox should be able to take off angles that Felix isn't on, so your opportunities are very narrow. It just has to be coordinated.
Starry Knight's already built up to the Tectonic Shock, and I mean, with that Tracer now not able to put any pressure here onto this Venture, right? I mean, expect to see that coming out as now Starry Knight digging and going for the Lucio, going to get them rather low. The Sojourn as well goes down just before the beat comes in, just a second late there from Hollow, and I mean, the Tectonic Shock just to try and secure it, gets both of the supports very low, and I mean, the value not going to immediately be found with that ultimate, but I mean, the effects certainly seen later down the line, and Redacted Ka get the first flip here on Busan.
Someone has to die. Mariposa just goes down a little bit too late. Even as Doobie trades with Saturn, I don't know how that plus one actually managed to get them, but hey, ping moment, sure. Even if you get Mariposa late on in the fight, Starry Knight has just been allowed to sit in your backline the whole time with this Venture Ultimate and just constantly throw damage at you. Kaiju Corps need to respond a little bit quicker to the people around them, force them out, and then run in.
Oh my. I mean, Starry Knight just got dove on Venture. That was kind of impressive, and now the Nano onto the Mauga, just a chunk damage in here to the Ramatra, but now beat to try and keep Redacted Ka alive here, and the cage as well, but kind of a matter of who's actually stuck with who in the cage here, but Doobie in the meanwhile just getting a bit of a shooting range, but now just the DPS members left here for Redacted Ka, just a matter of time till they go down, but may be able to get some pickoffs, but no, that's going to be all they get. Kaiju Corps, 74 now in building.
A sigh of relief for Kaiju Corps, because you invested pretty heavily in that fight to try and win the Annihilation, the Rush, and the Pulse Bomb all going out, and a sigh of, like, or rather a gasp of uncertainty for Redacted, because you used everything to try and hold on to that, and now Kaiju Corps have 90% in building on this control point.
Yeah, and the difference in ultimates will be that OC for Sandbox God are going to choose to pull it now, the beat as well, just to make sure everyone's healthy. And I mean, Phoenix just has to stand there and block, but I mean, that only does so much. Sandbox God goes down, which maybe gives a chance here for Redacted Ka, but I mean, the tank presence here from Felix is just immense. The Nemesis form still available, but won't even be needed. A rush just for funds at the end. And that's what you want to see for KCMX after a rough 2 last maps.
Yeah, really nice ult play from them on this occasion. No more hesitancy in just holding onto them forever. Nice tempo in going onto the targets that they need to go on at the start of the fight and addressing when they can catch people out. We can see Phoenix, who's hidden the UI to be able to keep killing people afterwards. We saw those little Doomfist squirt guns going off whilst we were in that little change of rounds. I know your tricks. I use them too. Kaiju Corps, maybe going to be starting on the Winston on this occasion. Please don't run Mercy with a Winston. That will not go your way. If you're going to do it, at least play the Diva. Please do it with the Diva if you're going to do it. Okay, thank you. Alright, we're going to start on the Kiriko most likely, and on this very high ground oppressive map, playing something like the Winston is going to be all the more advantageous, and that's why we're seeing Phoenix also starting on the Doomfist, which we've seen to just try and touch points before, but now actually fully committed to for the start of the round.
I really like to see this Winston again. It's looked so nice earlier, but I mean, they haven't played it into this Doomfist Moira Reaper comp yet, so will be interesting to see if they're able to do that. And Saturn poking down the Lucio will eventually get that kill, but I mean, things still quite aren't going Kaiju Core's way. Even numbers here, but with the chase down onto Sandbox God, and I mean, yeah, this Doomfist is looking quite good here for Phoenix, just able to move around so freely and find out these picks. And KCMX looked like for a second they were going to go for those stall picks, but they think better of it and back off.
Kaiju Core did a really good job. Saturn found a lot of early picks, but unfortunately Felix just goes down a little bit too early. Burned was the Winston, and that's why we're now seeing the swap onto the Diva. Sombra's now dueling as well, just to try and put some pressure onto each other. Some pressure onto Phoenix from the side of Kaiju Core. But it's just this poke game, as this low ground objective has to be constantly pressured onto by KCMX.
Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on the value that this Diva can get, the survivability of it. I mean, starting out pretty nicely, getting a lot of chip damage in, but I mean, it's Hollow, the first one to be found out here, and Felix, yeah, on the Diva, but just taking so much damage, and also just not able to help their teammates quite enough. But I mean, it did look a little bit better there. Saturn still finding value regardless of the character, but I mean, Redacted still holding on.
I mean, the key thing for Kaiju Core is which one of your players is going to be the one that forces resources out of Redacted without them just running down and killing you all, right? You don't have a Sojourn to just, like, very quickly do a bunch of damage. The Echo kind of has to set up to be able to get that sticky beam combo. Sandbox God as well, having to look for the setup constantly. Redacted get the opportunity to just run at you.
Yeah, and I mean, Saturn, who's been doing so much, goes down first. The Rush invested, but I mean, Kitsune Rush only really does things if you have members to stand in it, and I mean, Redacted have not really been touched here on Downtown.
No, it's just been a very clean set of fights for them, and it's because, like I said, Kaiju Core have to approach from too many angles, and it gives the opportunity for Redacted to just pick a target, everyone full sprint at them, kill them, job done, move on to the next.
Yeah, now, I mean, wow, the punch onto the Echo. I mean, we'll get the duplicate off just to survive, but it was some nice aggression there from Redacted to start off, but I mean, this Doom duplicate could make a difference, but I mean, everyone has the beat here for Redacted, and I mean, it's just too late for anything to be done here for KCMX. Just the Echo going down to Starry Night, and 100-0. I mean, that's a bit of a statement for Redacted here on Downtown.
That was a very dominant comeback as we get over to our now third submap of Busan, and potentially the last submap of the series. Redacted already 3-2 up in this. We were looking at Kaiju Core as being kind of breathe new life into them as we came back over to Control again, but that round was a complete shutout, and I feel like the composition that KCMX were running just didn't really make much sense. Like I highlighted, who's going to be your initiator? Who's going to be the one who gives you an opening? Because for Redacted, if they can just have the Moira fade in orb, the Lucio amp, the Doomfist punch in, kill everything onto one particular target, and that target can't get away easily, yeah, they're just going to do that. They're going to do it every single fight, even though there wasn't necessarily the same hesitation around Ultimates. You didn't build them in time to actually be able to use them, and even now, as we go over to Mecha Base, there's still this kind of hybrid composition that Kaiju Core are running that I'm still not in love with.
Yeah, and they went this to fight against the Doomfist, and now much brawlier style of play here, and Sandbox needs to be really careful, but in this brawly style, right, this Diva not going to be favored, but Phoenix oversteps, and I mean, this comp does have just a lot of damage that can be pumped out, and I mean, excuse me for talking about this comp, who cares if you just kill the whole enemy team? KCMX going to start off with the first capture here on Mecha Base, and this is so important with their lives on the line here on Busan.
It did feel like Phoenix kind of just misplayed it a little bit though on the Ramatra, went a little bit too deep. Now coming back on the Zarya, I think this is actually going to give more openings for KCMX, who can just play around the bubbles and then do the same thing again.
Yeah. Now Phoenix trying to chunk down, and a lot of members already really low here for KCMX. They're going to have to be careful, and it's actually Sandbox God behind who, a little bit out of sync with the rest of the team, will go down, and now this Zarya can start building up into the fight, but I mean, the bubbles are gone, the Blossom is good, Saturn finding out two with that, and a rush just to make sure. I think that might be a little bit of an overinvestment, but KCMX at least win out the fight.
Yeah, I'd say so as well. You probably are going to want that Kitsune rush back. This feels like the second time we've seen Wimi kind of pull that towards the tail end of a fight when Redacted have already committed to just not caring and losing anyway. It's one thing if they use ultimates to try and keep it alive, but now they just get to use ultimates to push back in aggressively in this next fight. Hollow's beat has to be perfect if they want to sustain through a Coal, a beat, a Tectonic Shock, and the Blossom.
Oh! I mean, Maripose goes for the Coalescence, but just fragged immediately, and that's going to mean the go button is pulled here for the rest of KCMX, and I mean, that's just a beautiful punish there onto the Moira. And I mean, I think now you start to believe here for KCMX 70%, and for Redacted on the other hand, I mean, this is looking desperate.
I believe it when I see it, okay? Sandbox God's EMP is now the new win condition Moonlight sound barrier. If it can get cancelled out by this, a forced Ajax by just hacking it through the EMP, that is going to be an ultimate fight.
And that's everyone hit! I mean, members already going down, but the beat and the grab will keep them in it, and Starry Night has found out 2 here on this venture. It's not quite over yet for KCMX. I mean, Felix did have the bomb, but I mean, not going to make the difference when the rest of the team is already gone. Fortunately, though, I don't think it's too big of a deal to lose that ultimate.
I mean, not the bomb, but the EMP in particular. Why did you pull it early? Redacted have to push in. We know that it's 99%. It would have been overtime for them for that next fight anyway. If you just waited and played the tempo so that they push in and then you counter the EMP, you would have been able to find a lot more value. Wimi's rush is now the pain point, but there's another Tectonic Shock on the point. If Kaiju Core take this fast, there's a chance. But maybe too fast here?
Yeah, I mean, Starry Night has to be careful not having that burrow any longer, but they're all grouped up for this Tectonic Shock. Will pay with her life, but, I mean, well worth the price there as the rest of the members of KCMX going to be cleaned on up. Now 40%. The grip here for Redacted is tightening.
Kaiju Core need to just breathe. Like, why are we rushing? Why are we EMPing? We don't need to take these fights as fast as we are. We can just take our time. Now Saturn's Blossom has to go in dry. There's a chance when there's no ultimates, but it's got to be a better one. That's a big pick onto Doobie.
And a nice hack there onto Moonlight means that, I mean, KCMX can start just moving on in. They've got this beat for that extra sustain. Phoenix so low, going to go down, and Saturn just finding 3 here in this fight, and I don't think anyone should be able to touch here. I mean, just a couple of members. The Wraith already has to be expended. A Blossom just to make sure here for Saturn. And I mean, they're trying their best to get the touches. There's a Coalescence, but again, the Coalescence with no one to heal is not really much of a help at all. And with the rest of these players cleaned up, KCMX gonna take us all the way to map 7. We're tied up here 3-3 Willow.
This has been a real, actual, genuine nail-biter of a series. It's something special when you're so invested in not just like the matches that are being played, but the players that are in them too, everything that the Rising series stands for, both in Calling All Heroes and in Kunoichi. This has been a real treat for me to be able to see. We knew both of these teams were going to be taking this to distance. We knew that we were going to be going long in this series and going all the way to a map 7. I mean, I really genuinely couldn't ask for more. It has been so much fun to see both teams trying to problem solve each other, such variety in compositions as well. There's not just like, we're going to keep playing our thing and just do that forever. There's so many swaps, there's so much variety coming through. It has been really exciting, and it makes it a little bit difficult almost to know that we're almost at the end, but it approaches nonetheless, as it always does.
Yeah, but we're gonna have a little bit of a final calm before the storm. Map 7 will be coming up, but short break. Give these teams time to kind of think, formulate their final strategies here going into this last map of the grand finals.
I'm not crazy, Malin. I'm not crazy, Malin. I've just been in a very bad mood for 40 years. 40 years.
Carpe diem. Carpe diem.
3 all here for KCMX versus Redacted Ka. One final map to try and carve their names into Rising history. Willow, it all ends here for one of these teams.
This is... I mean, we thought it was going to go the distance, right? We thought we were going to be seeing a long series. All the way to map 7 doesn't shock me, but it has genuinely had me on the edge of my seat going through this. As we go over to our last map on push, it will be Esperanza. And this... I mean, I feel like this is where everything gets equaled out. Esperanza is a map that has some really interesting geography compared to, I think, New Queen Street and Colosseo. I think if you were going to try and be Redacted running that same, like, Ana Elari backline as we saw previously, you're maybe going to struggle. For Kaiju Corps, this is the opportunity for you to run that Winston yet again, but when your only other choice is New Queen Street and you're scared of necessarily getting run down by a bunch of angles, I don't know, I kind of like it for Junker Queen if you were going to do it. So for Redacted, I feel like either one of these maps would be okay. I just think that Kaiju Corps are going to be feeling pretty comfortable here still themselves.
Yeah, but I think it'll be interesting to see what they do decide to pull out here on this final map, because, I mean, the Winston is playable here, and, I mean, they've shown, I mean, excellent things on that character, but they could also go for maybe some of that Ramatra, or maybe something that they've shown earlier in the series with, like, the Zarya. Lots of options here for them, but will be interesting at this final hour. What do you believe can get you that win?
That's the really key thing, is now you really are in it to win it, right? Doubts cast aside, moment of truth, it's not a matter of just having fun with it or, like, kind of getting as far as you can. You got as far as could reasonably be gotten. You've gotten further than would have been gotten if you just won quicker, okay? This is the ultimate length. So now it's just a matter of closing it out, playing as best you can for these last 10 minutes. We were talking about fatigue, we were talking about stamina, but none of that matters now. You've already made it to the end. You've just got to do one last little push, and you'll be okay. Redacted, floating that Sigma Baptiste. No Ana Ilari on this occasion, and I do think it's going to give them the opportunity to not be as punished by rotations as they have been previously. Starry Night staying on that Venture as well. We've seen how deadly she can be on this hero, and I think Venture is in a really good spot around this level where you can punish people who are out of position, and you can just level a bunch of damage in. Saturn, back over to the Genji sandbox, starting out on the Tracer, and there's Felix's Winston. It all comes down to this, and I am pumped.
Yeah, Felix back on this Winston, and that has looked so excellent, but taking just so much damage. But I mean, honestly, just the fear of this monkey has forced the members of Redacted Ka to back on up, but now they choose to be the time to maybe go on in. You have to be a little bit careful of this Tracer behind, though, so really just still chilling in this pocket. And in the meanwhile, Phoenix, under so much pressure, gets booped back in, is able to survive, but I mean, only for so long. And now with Mariposa gone, it just seems like this fight is crumbling here for Redacted Ka, and Kaiju Corps already getting some push on this bot. 20 meters, and is still going to start out on Esperanza.
And it feels like Starry Night has been this main driving force of damage for Redacted so far. Just have the Venture leveling as much as they can, force cooldowns out of the Winston, force more passive play out of the Genji and the Tracer, but the Venture can only be in one place at once, and Kaiju Corps still playing around the angles that we know and love. They've done a really good job of exposing weaknesses where they can, forcing the cooldown trades to be advantageous to them, and even as Saturn goes low, Wimi's there to make sure that the Genji stays alive as forward spawns already unlocked for KCMX.
I mean, this is an incredible lead to just begin, right? It's been 2 minutes. They've got rush. They've got the point. If they can just go now with this rush, which they do choose to do, then before Redacted get a chance to build any ults, they could win it out. And, I mean, Mariposa, again, just under so much pressure, does fall, and that is going to enable the rest of KCMX to just run on in. And are we staggering a Sigma?
I mean, it's not really a stagger because Phoenix is doing the sensible thing of dying on the push bot, which is something that Fable Rising don't do. I'm glad Redacted have learned, at least. But Kaiju Corps MX, I mean, it's a little bit of a stagger. You're going to get the distance because of it. Phoenix now actually going over to the Ramatra and Starry Night on this May. This is just the run-it-down main composition that we've seen from them previously, and Kaiju Corps are going to have to adapt to be able to deal with it properly. That is not the adaptation we were looking for.
I mean, that's a good pick, though. that does give them a chance into this fight, because I mean, without that, there's just a significant ultimate deficit. They also are able to stave off that Dragon Blade, and now Saturn went really low and goes down. And I mean, honestly, that's about as good as it gets there for Redacted. That's 4 ults used by KCMX for just the sound barrier.
Yeah, you're very, very happy with that indeed. In fairness, I think it was only 3 because Hollow used the beat really late towards the end of the previous fight, so it was just Pulse, Blades, and the Primal, but now Felix going over to the Mauga, it's just the same deal as we saw on Hollywood. Okay, you're going to bring out the Ramacha, fine. We'll just keep shooting you in the face. Now it's on Starry Night's walls to isolate the Mauga away from the rest of his team. It's going to be a little bit difficult, though, because this Kiriko can just circumvent your walls entirely.
And I mean, that shield was really good, stopping the pressure from KCMX and then also stopping the healing, but it doesn't matter. The Blossom, I mean, it looked good. It was in the middle of a lot of members, but they're able to just barely survive there, and then they're able to respond just with a lot of damage of their own, and that's KCMX getting
Guy on the bot. Don't stag yourself away from the bot. Now the Ramacha's just caught out the back lines. No, this is a real earnest true stagger. If you use the and Moonlight picked off as well, the Ramacha has to die. They have to get back to the team. Look how much distance KCMX are getting for free. They've actually elected to ignore the Ramacha altogether, knowing that Phoenix is going to have to regroup around here. There's an Annihilation available, but KCMX can deal with it.
And I mean, there's the Annihilation. The bell is out, but I mean, Malgus just does
Phoenix.
infinite damage when you're such a large target. And so now they're going to use the rush on in to just clean up these members. And with these staggers, as Sandbox God gets this Pulse Bomb, I mean, have Redacted let it slip. They were 1 map, 1 point away, and now 100 meters, and still going to just 30.
And Kaiju Core still have ultimates. They've got a Sound Barrier, they've got a Death Blossom. Starry Night's Blizzard will probably just get amp speeded away. Mariposa's Coalescence has to really be the turning point for Redacted if they want to do this. You can use the Blizzard to force space, but Kaiju Core have space to give. And it all comes down to this when the bot is so close to the end of the map.
As Saturn and the rest of the team opting to give a little bit space to maybe take the fight from a more favorable position, but this could mean that if they do lose this fight, the bot is further or closer for Redacted to start gaining meterage. And now the Blizzard comes down, met with a beat, but Felix not going to be able to stay alive. And I mean, this is a very important fight for Redacted, because I mean, they've got to start chipping away at this massive lead that KCMX have built up.
KCMX did take that pretty slow. They kept backing. They didn't want to invest ultimates themselves, just the Sound Barrier for the Coalescence and the Blizzard. But it's given Redacted the opportunity now to build up ultimates of their own. They're going to have a beat when KCMX don't. They're going to have a Death Blossom as well to match Saturn. So if KCMX want to maintain their advantage, they have to take this next fight fast and deny that forward spawn from Redacted.
As now Felix going in with the stomp, able to get 1 stun, and the Lucio booped up in the cage, not going to be able to get barriers onto all the members of the team, and a Phoenix is just stuck with no ability to be helped by anyone from the team. But I mean, that's just going to be KCMX again, just winning out this fight, and I mean, at least a little bit of distance gained there for Redacted. They almost get the checkpoint, but it just seems like so little in comparison to what KCMX have going for them.
And almost is the crucial word, because now you have to play into a Kitsune Rush. You used your Sound Barrier but lost the fights. Now Hollow's going to have the advantage for that in the fight after next. Sandbox God has a Pulse Bomb as well to try and force out something like Cryo or Wraith early, forcing Doobie and Starry to playing a little bit more quick, safe. Joint Cardiac Overdrives and the Kitsune Rush from Wemi. Casey wanted to close this out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and Shadow with the Pulse Bomb, no one saw her coming, and I mean, it's just a free kill onto the Mauga, and everything collapsing here for Redacted. The Moira's going to be staggered. In this meanwhile, Hollow has been stealing the bot 130 meters, and it just keeps getting worse. The rest of the team about to arrive. If they win this fight, KCMX will be champions.
There's no Sombra here to completely deny Phoenix's cage fight, but the amount of damage coming through necessitates Mariposa to use the Coalescence early. KCMX are just going to back out for it. It's a sensible move from them, because they can re-engage afterwards.
Yeah, and there's the cage to get back into this, and now, I mean, the members so low, but they're taking the brawl in the cage. All of them frozen, but is there the damage to break through the barriers? That's one, that's two down. Redacted still in this fight, but, I mean, they haven't completely saved it yet. I mean, just the Moira there on the car will go down, but they've at least done enough. KCMX understanding that they do have to fall off of the bot.
I mean, they just don't want to push it too close, right? Every step that Redacted have to take to get back to the bot is another bit of advantage that Kaiju Corps themselves are going to get. If they fight it close, they know Redacted can build up to ultimates, when Kaiju Corps already have a clear ult advantage with 4 online right now.
And Sandbox God with another pulse bomb, and that's the cardiac already out, so stick comes through Sandbox!
Oh my.
Finds 3 at the final hour, and she understands what this means. That could just be the final nail in the coffin here. Kaiju Corps MX going to be able to continue rolling the bot on forward, and it's going to have to be a stagger fight here for Redacted COD. They do have the sound barrier, but they're running into the Kitsune Rush. Phoenix already down, and it's just a couple of meters left. Moonlight trying her hardest, but there's a cage, there's a Blossom, and Kaiju Corps MX do not want to be denied. Phoenix going down, and it's just a little bit of push left, and Kaiju Corps MX, they do it. They are your Kunoichi Kommotion Rising Champions.
It's so exciting to see when teams are able to make improvements like these. Redacted, all throughout the qualifiers, had been the undefeated team 5-0 in matches. And when we saw Redacted actually losing to Kaiju Corps yesterday, it was this question of, like, is this even, like, real? You know, like, was this a proper loss for Redacted, or is it just an off day for them? Being able to come back in and prove it definitively. Esperanza did not look close at all. That was the ultimate round off, the cherry on top for a series that went to a map 7 for Kaiju Corps. They proved that they could go the distance, and they proved that at the end of the day, they could go even further still. Redacted end up 3 maps, Kaiju Corps 4. That's exactly what you're looking for if you are Kaiju Corps. That's a really nice team. It's just, I'm just excited. I'm hyped up. I like seeing people who, like, improve being in the Rising series. It's so fun, and, I'm all worked up over it, but I gotta bring myself back down a little bit because I feel like I'm just mincing my words all the time at this point.
Yes, Kaiju Corps writing their names in the halls of Rising history. And now we're going to go to a quick break, but don't go anywhere because we're going to have a couple of interviews just after this. Hello and welcome back. We're here joined by Sandbox God after an incredible victory, and I mean, I've just got to ask, how do you feel at this moment?
Absolutely ecstatic. We did a lot of prep for this. I spent like several hours last night just watching things back and doing VOD review to play it better. And it paid off. We were able to win, so I'm very happy with me and my team.
We saw that your team was like always coming together, and it felt like there were a few adaptations that had to come through mid-series, perhaps, especially on Rialto. It looked like you guys struggled a little bit more than we'd seen on previous maps in particular. So was there a particular thing you guys worked on kind of mid-series that you think changed the tempo for you at the end? Because Esperanza looked dominant.
Yeah, just mostly recognizing what the enemy team was playing and how we would have to play as a team to kind of counter it. Obviously, different enemy columns require different play styles, and it's sometimes mismatching those, what the enemy's playing. So we were able to perfectly sync up for the final map and did really well.
And we know that Kaijukura have played in the Calling All Heroes Rising series before, you know, and we're seeing you now in the Kunoichi Rising series. With the cast season going to be starting up soon, are we going to be able to see you guys again? You excited? Looking forward to it?
Yep, the plan is the exact same team for the coming season, so it's going to be great.
I mean, you'll love to see it again. I feel like in the Overwatch scene, so many teams just like break apart after one tournament. So, love to see teams sticking together, improving together in the long run. So, I mean, very excited to, you know, see where you guys get to go from here. So, I mean, best of luck to you and the rest of Kaiju Core MX in the future. And I mean, I guess I'll just leave the floor open to you if you have anything you want to say, anyone you want to shout out. Floor is yours.
I guess obviously, shout out to Rose, being our manager and captain. She does great. Got me to join the team day of signups closing for Calling All Heroes last major when I played. I just decided on a whim to get back into this competitive Overwatch and joined last minute, and it's been great since then. Really enjoying it, and love the entire team.
Nice.
Yeah, well, you'll have to hear it. I don't think I have really many questions. Willow, do you have anything else?
I mean, it's just good to see, a team come together, and we noted the improvement that Kaijikura have made. It's exciting to hear that you're going to be continuing to do the Rising circuit for the foreseeable future, and we're excited to see more of you.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
once again, congratulations on just an excellent, well-deserved victory. You can go now, celebrate with your team, do whatever you guys want to. I mean, you guys have earned it. And great talking to you.
It was nice talking to both of you as well.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, and with that, I believe that's pretty much gonna be it here for the Kunoichi Kommotion Rising series, the first of hopefully many. But Kunoichi not done just yet. If you want to head over to twitch.tv/KunoichiCGL, the Challengers series game is just starting, so go check out that one. Green Fortnite versus Chengdu Drainers. It should be another banger match. But that's it from me and Willow and the rest of the team that's been working on Rising. Thank you very much for showing up.